I had spent 30 years building the kind of life other men envied. A corner office on Michigan Avenue, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago River. A brownstone in Lincoln Park that my wife and I had renovated ourselves, back when we still laughed over paint swatches and argued about crown molding. A son at Northwestern studying architecture, following in his old man's footsteps. And Victoria Vicky, my wife of 23 years, the woman I thought I knew better than I knew myself. That October morning started like any other. I kissed Vicky goodbye at 6:47 a.m., the same time I'd kissed her goodbye for 2 decades. She smelled like Chanel No. 5 and coffee. Her CFO meeting at Northwestern Memorial Hospital started at 8, and she never liked to be late. "Dinner at Gibson's tonight?" I asked. She smiled. That smile I'd fallen in love with at a fundraiser in 1999. 7 o'clock. Don't be late. I wasn't planning to be. My name is Marcus Whitfield. I'm 54 years old. I own Whitfield and Associates, one of Chicago's most respected architecture firms. Before that, I spent 8 years as a financial crimes analyst with the FBI. I mention this because what happened next required every skill I'd ever learned, both in designing structures and in detecting when something was fundamentally wrong with the foundation. The Peninsula Hotel wasn't on my schedule that day. I was supposed to meet a client at the Art Institute, but he canceled last minute. So, I decided to grab lunch at the hotel's restaurant, a place Vicky and I used to frequent when we were dating. The valet stand was busy. 3 cars ahead of mine. I didn't mind waiting. I was checking emails, responding to a contractor about the Morrison project, when I heard a voice. I looked up. An older man in a Peninsula uniform stood at my window. Late 50s, maybe 60. African American, with gray at his temples and the kind of eyes that had seen too much. His name tag read, Raymond. "Sir, is that your wife?" I followed his gaze across the circular driveway. And there she was, Victoria, my Vicky, walking out of the hotel's main entrance at 12:34 p.m. on a Tuesday when she should have been in budget meetings at the hospital. She wasn't alone. A man walked beside her. Tall, silver-streaked hair, expensive charcoal suit. He placed his hand on the small of her back, that spot just above her hip, that I thought belonged only to me. She laughed at something he said. That laugh. I knew that laugh. My chest tightened. 23 years. 2 decades of shared meals and shared dreams and a son we'd raised together. And here she was, laughing with another man in broad daylight. "Sir." The valet's voice dropped to a whisper. He leaned closer to my window, and I caught something in his expression. Not pity. Something else. Recognition. "You might want to come back tomorrow. Same time. And when you do," he pressed something into my hand. A hotel room keycard. Suite 1847. "Bring a camera." I stared at the key card. Then at the valet. Then at my wife, who was now climbing into the passenger seat of a silver Mercedes I didn't recognize. "Why are you telling me this?" My voice came out hoarse. The valet Raymond held my gaze for a long moment. Something passed between us. Something I couldn't name yet. "Because some secrets," he said quietly, "destroy families, and some secrets save them." He stepped back from my car, adjusted his vest, became just another hotel employee again. But I saw it now. The thing I'd missed before. His name tag didn't just say Raymond. It said Raymond Whitfield, same last name as mine. His name tag said Raymond Whitfield. I sat in my car for a full minute, engine idling, staring at the space where the valet had stood. The key card felt heavy in my palm, heavier than plastic should feel. Suite 1847. My wife, another man, and a stranger with my last name who somehow knew exactly what I needed to see. Coincidence? That's what I told myself as I pulled out of the Peninsula's driveway. Whitfield isn't exactly rare. There are probably dozens of us in Chicago alone, maybe hundreds. But I'd spent 8 years at the FBI learning that coincidences are usually just patterns we haven't recognized yet. I didn't go back to the office. Instead, I drove to Grant Park and sat on a bench overlooking Buckingham Fountain, watching tourists take photos while my world quietly collapsed. The image kept replaying. Vicky's laugh, the man's hand on her back, the easy intimacy between them. This wasn't a first meeting. This was habit, routine. How long? The question gnawed at me. Weeks? Months? Years? My phone buzzed. A text from Vicky. Asterisk. Budget meeting running late. Might be 7:30 instead of 7. Love you. Asterisk. Love you. I typed back. Asterisk. Then I opened my browser and searched Raymond Whitfield, Chicago. 3 hours later, I had a name, an address, and a history that made no sense. Raymond Whitfield, age 57. Retired Chicago Police Department detective, 22 years on the force. Specialized in fraud and financial crimes. Divorced. No children. Current residence. A modest apartment in Rogers Park. Current employment. Part-time valet at the Peninsula Hotel. A decorated detective working as a parking attendant. That alone was strange enough. But the detail that stopped my breath came from an old Tribune article, dated 1987. Asterisk Thomas Whitfield, prominent loop attorney, dies at 61. Survived by his wife Margaret, son Marcus, 15, and son Raymond, 22, from a previous relationship. Asterisk. Son Raymond from a previous relationship. I had a brother I'd never known existed. My father, the man who taught me to draft blueprints, who paid for my Northwestern education, who walked me down the aisle at my wedding and held Derek when he was born, had another son. 22 years old when that article was written, which meant he'd been born when my father was barely out of law school, before he met my mother. Before me, I needed answers. And there was only one person who could give them. The next morning, I returned to the peninsula at exactly 12:30 p.m. Raymond was working the valet stand. Same position, same uniform. When he saw my car approach, something flickered in his eyes. Not surprise. Expectation. You came back, he said. You knew I would. He glanced around, checking for witnesses. My shift ends at 1. There's a coffee shop 2 blocks north. Intelligentsia. Meet me there. Why should I trust you? Raymond leaned closer. His voice dropped low. Because I've been watching your wife for 6 months. Because I know who that man is and what he's done to 4 other women. And because he paused. And for the first time, I saw something vulnerable beneath his hardened exterior. Because our father asked me to look out for you. Before he died, the world tilted. That's impossible. My father never mentioned. I know. Raymond straightened, resuming his professional distance as another car pulled up behind me. 1 o'clock. Intelligentsia. I'll explain everything. He handed a ticket to the next driver. And just like that, I was dismissed. I spent the next 30 minutes circling the block. My architect's mind trying to construct a framework for what I'd just learned. A half-brother. A 6-month surveillance operation. A dying father's secret request. None of it fit the blueprints I thought I understood. At 12:58 p.m., I walked into Intelligentsia Coffee. Raymond was already there, sitting in a corner booth with 2 cups in front of him. He'd changed out of his uniform into a worn leather jacket. He looked up as I approached. Hello, Marcus, he said. I'm Ray. I'm your brother. And I'm sorry, but everything you think you know about your life is about to change. He slid a manila folder across the table. Starting with this. I opened it. Inside was a photograph. My wife. The silver-haired man. A hotel room. And a date stamp. Asterisk the 17th of April 2024. Asterisk. 6 months ago. April 17. Doa mi doazech. Shipatru. I stared at the photograph until my eyes burned. Vicky, in a white bathrobe, the kind hotels provide. The silver-haired man behind her, his arms wrapped around her waist, both of them laughing. The Langham Chicago logo, visible on the robe's breast pocket. Suite number partially visible in the hallway mirror. 184. 6 months. She'd been lying to me for 6 months. There's more, Ray said quietly. He didn't touch his coffee. Neither did I. How much more? Enough to destroy a marriage, or save a man's life. He leaned back in the booth. Depends on how you look at it. I closed the folder. My hands were steady, a skill I'd developed during FBI interrogations. Never let them see you break. Start from the beginning. Who are you, really? And why have you been watching my wife? Ray exhaled slowly. I told you. I'm your brother. Half-brother. Same father, different mothers. Thomas Whitfield met my mother in 1965, when he was a junior associate at a Loop law firm. She was a secretary. They had an affair. She got pregnant. He paid for an apartment in Rogers Park and visited every Sunday until I was 12. Then, he married your mother, and the visits stopped. He never told me. He never told anyone. I was his secret. His mistake. Ray's voice held no bitterness, only the flatness of old wounds. But he kept tabs on me. When I joined the force, he sent a letter. When I made detective, he sent another. And when he was dying liver cancer, 1,987, he asked me to come to the hospital. I remembered that hospital. I was 15. I held my father's hand as he slipped away. I was there too, Ray said, reading my thoughts. Different floor, different room. He had 30 minutes with me before he died. Told me about you. Said you were brilliant, but trusting. Said you'd need someone watching your back someday. Someone who understood how the world really worked. He paused. He made me promise. Promise what? To protect you. If you ever needed it. The coffee shop hummed around us. Normal people having normal conversations. I felt like I was underwater. And you decided I needed protection 6 months ago? Ray nodded. I retired from CPD in 2019. Took the valet job to stay busy. Old cops don't do well with nothing to do. Then in April, I saw your wife. She came to the peninsula with a man I recognized. Recognized how? Ray reached into his jacket and pulled out a second folder, thicker than the first. His name is Dr. Julian Mercer, 43 years old, neurosurgeon at Northwestern Memorial, published author, TED speaker, regular on Chicago's charity circuit. On paper, he's a saint. He opened the folder and spread its contents across the table. Photographs, bank statements, police reports, newspaper clippings from Boston, Miami, Dallas, Phoenix, Atlanta. Off paper, he's a predator. He targets wealthy married women, specifically women in healthcare administration with access to institutional funds. He seduces them, isolates them from their husbands, then convinces them to invest in a fake medical technology startup. By the time the women realize they've been scammed, he's moved to another city with another name and another victim. My stomach turned. How many? 5 confirmed. Probably more who were too ashamed to report. Ray tapped a photograph of a woman in her 50s. Elegant, professional. Dr. Meredith Sinclair, CFO of Boston Medical Center. Lost $520,000 to Julian in 2019. Her marriage ended. Her career nearly did too. I looked at the other photos. Different women, different cities. Same pattern. Same destroyed lives. Total confirmed theft. $3.2 million, Ray continued. And your wife has already transferred $240,000 to an LLC called Lakeshore Medical Innovations. His company. His scam. The number hit me like a physical blow. $240,000. From our joint accounts? From her hospital position? How do you know all this? Ray smiled grimly. 22 years of financial crimes investigation. Little brother. Some habits don't die. He gathered the documents back into the folder. I've got 6 months of surveillance footage, hotel records, financial trails, and witness statements. Enough to prove the affair, prove the fraud, and put Julian Mercer behind bars for a very long time. He slid the folder across to me. The question is, what do you want to do with it? I looked at the folder. At Ray. At the coffee. Going cold between us. 30 years of building. 23 years of marriage. A son I loved more than my own life. All of it balanced on this moment. I want to see everything, I said. Every photograph. Every transaction. Every lie. Ray nodded slowly. Then, we need to go somewhere private. He stood, dropping a 20 on the table. I've got a storage unit in Wicker Park. Climate-controlled. Secure. That's where I keep the real evidence. The real evidence? His eyes met mine. The security footage. Marcus. 6 months of your wife walking into the Langham every Tuesday and Thursday. 6 months of Julian Mercer destroying your marriage in high definition. He headed for the door. I followed. The storage unit was in a converted warehouse on Milwaukee Avenue, the kind of place where artists kept failed sculptures and divorced men stored the furniture their ex-wives didn't want. Ray's unit was on the 3rd floor, tucked behind a freight elevator that groaned like it remembered better days. I've had this space since '09, Ray said, punching a code into the keypad. Used it for case files when I was on the force. Old habits. The door rolled up to reveal something that looked less like storage and more like a detective's war room. Filing cabinets lined the walls. A desk sat in the center, covered with monitors and recording equipment. One wall was dominated by a corkboard filled with photographs, red string connecting faces, and locations like a conspiracy theorist's fever dream. Except, this wasn't a theory. This was my life, pinned up and dissected. Jesus, I breathed. I know it looks obsessive. Ray walked to the desk and powered on the monitors. But Julian Mercer is careful, smart. He's been doing this for at least 8 years without getting caught. The only way to take him down is to document everything. I approached the corkboard. There was Vicky, captured in a telephoto lens outside the Langham. There was Julian, getting into his Mercedes. There were bank statements, flight records, corporate filings, and in the center, connected to everything, a single question written in red marker. Who's next? You've been doing this alone? I have contacts, former colleagues who owe me favors. But the legwork? Yeah, just me. Ray pulled up a video file on the main monitor. This is from last Tuesday, October 8th. The footage showed the Langham's lobby from a high angle, probably a security camera Ray had somehow accessed. I watched my wife walk through the revolving door at 12:17 p.m. She was wearing the gray Armani suit I'd bought her for our 20th anniversary. Julian appeared moments later. They didn't touch in public. They didn't need to. The way they looked at each other said everything. They go straight to the elevator, Ray narrated. Suite 1847. She stays for exactly 2 hours and 14 minutes. Then she leaves through the parking garage while he takes the main exit. They never leave together. Never arrive together. Like clockwork. I watched my wife disappear into an elevator with another man, and something inside me shifted. The shock was fading. In its place came something colder, harder. Show me everything. For the next 3 hours, Ray walked me through his investigation. The timeline, the financial records, the pattern that Julian had perfected over 5 cities and 5 victims. It always started the same way. Julian would identify his target at a medical conference or hospital fundraiser. Always a woman in healthcare administration. Always married. Always with access to significant funds. He'd cultivate the relationship slowly, professionally at first. Coffee meetings, consultations, then dinners, then hotels. Once the affair was established, he'd introduce the opportunity. A revolutionary medical technology startup. AI-assisted surgical planning, blockchain-secured patient records. The specifics changed, but the pitch was always the same. Ground floor investment, guaranteed returns, total confidentiality. The confidentiality is the key, Ray explained. He convinces them to invest without telling their husbands. uses the affair as leverage. If they talk about the investment, they have to explain how they know Julian. So they stay silent. And by the time they realize it's a scam, he's already moved on. With their money and their dignity. Ray pulled up another file. Meredith Sinclair in Boston, lost $520,000. Patricia Vance in Miami, $310,000. Elena Rodriguez in Dallas, $480,000. Sarah Chen in Phoenix, $615,000. I did the math in my head. That's over $3 million total. 3.2, officially. But I suspect there are victims who never came forward. Women who paid the loss rather than face the humiliation. Ray turned to face me. Your wife has transferred $240,000 so far, but Julian's pattern suggests he'll push for more. A lot more. How much more? His average take per victim is $640,000. He's patient. He'll drain every account he can access before he disappears. I thought about our finances, the joint savings, Vicky's retirement accounts, her access to hospital funds as CFO. The numbers spiraled in my mind. We need to stop him. We will. Ray reached into his desk and pulled out a worn leather journal. But first, you need to understand something. He handed me the journal. The cover was cracked. The pages yellowed. Inside, I recognized my father's handwriting, the same precise script I'd seen on birthday cards and architecture critiques throughout my childhood. He gave this to me the day he died, Ray said. Read the last entry. I turned to the final page. The date was the 14th of March, 1987, 3 days before my father passed. Raymond, I have made many mistakes in my life, but keeping you a secret was the worst. I told myself I was protecting everyone. You, your mother, Margaret, Marcus, but I was only protecting myself from judgment, from consequence, from the hard conversations I was too weak to have. Asterisk Marcus is a good boy. Smart, kind, but he sees the best in people, even when they don't deserve it. He will need someone to show him the shadows, someone who understands that the world is not always what it appears. Asterisk, be his brother. Even if he never knows it, watch over him. And when the time comes, when someone tries to take advantage of his trust, show him the truth. Asterisk. I'm sorry. I wasn't brave enough to give you both the family you deserved. Asterisk. Your father. Asterisk. Thomas. I read it twice. Then a third time. My eyes burned, but I refused to let the tears fall. He knew. I said finally. He knew someone would try to hurt me. He knew you were the kind of man worth protecting. Ray took the journal back gently, and he was right. I looked at my half-brother, this stranger who had spent 6 months guarding my life from the shadows, who had kept a dying man's promise for 37 years. What do we do now? Ray's expression hardened. Now we make a plan. And we take Julian Mercer down. I didn't go home that night. I told Vicky I had a late meeting with investors, a lie that came easier than it should have. 23 years of honesty, and she had no reason to suspect that her husband was sitting in a storage unit in Wicker Park, learning how to dismantle their marriage. Ray ordered pizza. We ate in silence, surrounded by evidence of my wife's betrayal, while I tried to construct a framework for what came next. You have options, Ray said finally, wiping grease from his fingers. More than you think. Walk me through them. He stood and moved to a whiteboard mounted on the wall. I hadn't noticed it before it was covered with a sheet. He pulled the sheet away to reveal a flowchart, meticulously drawn, with my name at the top and branching paths below. Option 1. Confrontation. You go home tonight, show Vicky the photographs, and demand answers. Pros. Immediate emotional release. Potential for reconciliation if she's genuinely remorseful. Cons, she warns Julian. He disappears. You lose any chance of recovering your money or seeing him prosecuted. He drew an X through that branch. Option 2. Divorce and walk away. You hire a lawyer, file papers, split assets, move on with your life. Pros: clean break, minimal drama. You keep your dignity. Cons: Julian continues his pattern with the next victim. And the next. And the next. Another X. Option 3. We build a case. Document everything. Coordinate with law enforcement. Set a trap that catches Julian in the act of fraud, not just adultery. Pros: justice, restitution, protection for future victims. Cons: it takes time, patience. And you have to watch your wife continue her affair while pretending you don't know. He circled option 3. I know which one I'd choose, Ray said. But it's not my marriage, not my money, not my decision. I stared at the whiteboard. The architect in me appreciated the logic, clean lines, clear consequences, structural integrity. But this wasn't a building. This was my life, my family. What about Derek? Ray's expression softened. Your son, 21, Northwestern architecture student, interning at your firm this semester. He doesn't know anything about this. Not yet. But if you choose option 3, he'll find out eventually. The trial will be public. The media will cover it. You need to decide how and when he learns the truth from you. Or from a headline. I thought about Derek. His easy laugh. His mother's eyes. The way he called me every Sunday, even though we lived in the same city, just to check in. He worshipped Vicky. This would destroy him. There's something else, I said slowly. Something you haven't mentioned. Ray waited. My sister, Charlotte. She's a partner at Hayes and Whitfield, one of the top divorce firms in Illinois. If anyone can protect my assets while we build this case, it's her. I know who Charlie is. Ray almost smiled. I've kept tabs on your whole family, little brother. She's good. Maybe the best divorce attorney in Chicago. She's also relentless. And she hates being lied to. I pulled out my phone. If I bring her in, she'll want to know everything. Including you. Including me. I looked at my half-brother, this man who had lived in the shadows of our family for 57 years, who had watched from a distance while I grew up with the father he'd only known in secret visits and deathbed confessions. Are you ready for that? To meet her? To be known? Ray was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. I've spent my whole life being the secret, the mistake. The son Thomas Whitfield was ashamed of. He met my eyes. Maybe it's time to be something else. I dialed Charlie's number. She answered on the second ring. Marcus? It's almost midnight. What's wrong? I need you to come somewhere. Tonight. There's something I have to show you. And someone you need to meet. Marcus. You're scaring me. Is it Vicky? Is it Derek? I looked at Ray. At the wall of evidence. At the branching paths of my future. It's everything, Charlie. It's everything. I gave her the address. She said she'd be there in 30 minutes. While we waited, Ray poured 2 glasses of whiskey from a bottle he kept in his desk. To taking down predators, he said. I raised my glass. To family, I replied. The ones we're born with, and the ones we find. We drank. The whiskey burned, and somewhere across the city, my wife was sleeping peacefully beside an empty pillow, dreaming of a man who wasn't me. Tomorrow, I would smile at her over breakfast. Kiss her goodbye at 6:47 a.m. Pretend that nothing had changed. But everything had changed. The trap was being set. And Julian Mercer had no idea what was coming. Tuesday, October 15th, 11:47 a.m. I sat in a rented Camry across from the Langham, Chicago, wearing a Cubs cap and sunglasses like some cliché from a bad detective movie. Ray was right. I should have let him handle the surveillance, but I needed to see it myself. Needed to watch my wife walk into that hotel with my own eyes, not through a photograph or a security feed. Charlie had arrived at the storage unit at 12:34 a.m. the night before. She'd listened to everything without interrupting the affair. The fraud, the half-brother she never knew existed. When I finished, she sat in silence for a full minute. Then she turned to Ray. "You've been watching over my brother for 37 years, she said. "And you never once introduced yourself. Your father asked me to stay hidden. My father's been dead since 1987. Charlie's voice was sharp, but her eyes were wet. "You could have come forward any time. I know." Ray didn't look away from her. "I was afraid." "Of what?" "Of being rejected." Again, Charlie crossed the room and did something I never expected. She hugged him. This woman who cross-examined witnesses for a living, who made opposing counsel weep in depositions, wrapped her arms around our secret brother and held on. "Welcome to the family," she whispered. "You stubborn, ridiculous man." Now, 12 hours later, I was parked on East Wacker Drive, waiting for my marriage to officially end. She arrived at 12:14 p.m. Black Mercedes. Valet parking. Vicky stepped out, wearing the emerald dress I'd bought her in Milan 2 summers ago. She smiled at the doorman, that warm, professional smile she used at hospital galas and charity events. Then, she disappeared through the revolving door. 3 minutes later, Julian Mercer arrived. Silver Porsche, 911. Custom plates, NeuroSRG. He handed his keys to the valet with the casual arrogance of a man who'd never faced consequences in his life. Charcoal suit, silver cufflinks, the kind of tan you get from expensive vacations, not honest labor. I watched him walk into the hotel, watched him smile at the concierge, watched him step into the elevator, going up to suite 1847, going up to my wife. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Ray's voice crackled through my earpiece. He was in a van 2 blocks away, monitoring the hotel's security feeds through a contact in their IT department. They're in the elevator together. Separate corners, not touching. Professional distance until the doors close. Then what? A pause. Then, they're not professional anymore. I closed my eyes, breathed, counted to 10 the way I'd learned in FBI training. Emotional control, tactical patience. The mission was bigger than my pain. How long do they usually stay? 2 hours, 14 minutes. Give or take. Ray's voice was gentle. "You don't have to watch the whole thing, Marcus. Go get lunch. I'll call you when she leaves." "No. I need to know." "Know what?" "You've seen the photos. You've seen the footage. What else is there?" I opened my eyes and stared at the Langham's gleaming facade. "I need to know if she hesitates. If she looks around before she goes in. If there's any part of her that remembers who she used to be." I swallowed hard. "I need to know if my wife is still in there somewhere. Or if Julian Mercer already killed her." Ray didn't respond. The minutes crawled by. I watched businessmen come and go. Tourists with shopping bags. A bride and groom posing for photos on the riverfront. Laughing. Oblivious to the wreckage happening 14 floors above them. At 2:31 p.m., 2 hours and 17 minutes after she'd arrived, Vicky emerged from the parking garage in her Mercedes. She was reapplying lipstick in the rearview mirror, checking her hair, erasing the evidence. She didn't hesitate, didn't look around, didn't show a single sign of guilt or doubt. My wife was gone. Julian Mercer had hollowed her out and filled the space with secrets. "Marcus." Ray's voice was quiet. "You okay?" I started the Camry's engine. "No," I said. "But I will be." I pulled into traffic, heading toward LaSalle Street. Charlie was waiting at her office with a forensic accountant and a stack of subpoenas. The investigation was officially underway, and the clock was ticking on Julian Mercer's freedom. Dr. Julian Mercer, 43 years old, graduate of Johns Hopkins Medical School, residency at Massachusetts General, fellowship at the Cleveland Clinic, board-certified neurosurgeon specializing in minimally invasive spinal procedures, author of 2 best-selling books, Asterisk, The Healing Mind, Times and Times Rewiring Pain, Asterisk, TED Talk speaker with over 4 million views, regular contributor to CNN Health. named one of Chicago Magazine's 40. Under 40 inches, 2019. On paper, he was everything a woman could want. Bryson, successful, charming, the kind of man who made other men feel inadequate just by walking into a room. Charlie's forensic accountant had built a different profile. His name wasn't always Julian Mercer, said David Chen, spreading documents across Charlie's conference table. David was 52, bald, and had the kind of quiet intensity that made witnesses confess things they'd never intended to say. He'd spent 20 years at the IRS before going private, and he could trace money through shell companies the way I could trace load-bearing walls through blueprints. Born Julian Marcus Crane in Philadelphia, 1981. Changed his name legally in 2009, right after leaving Boston. David tapped a court document. The timing is significant. That's 6 months after Dr. Meredith Sinclair filed a civil suit against him, a suit that was quietly settled out of court for an undisclosed sum. He paid her off, Ray said. He paid her silence. There's a difference. David pulled up a spreadsheet on his laptop. I've traced Lakeshore Medical Innovations LLC back through 3 layers of shell companies. The ultimate beneficiary is a trust registered in the Cayman Islands. The trust's administrator? A law firm in Panama that specializes in, let's call it, aggressive privacy. Charlie leaned forward. Can we prove Julian controls the trust? Not yet. But I found something interesting. David clicked to a new screen. Every time Julian moves to a new city, a new LLC appears with a similar structure. Boston, Atlantic Surgical Partners. Miami, Coastal Health Ventures. Dallas, Lone Star Medical Holdings. Phoenix, Desert Wellness Innovations. Atlanta, Peachtree Healthcare Solutions. Chicago, Lakeshore Medical Innovations. Same scam, different names, I said. Same scam, same pattern, same outcome. David pulled out a timeline he'd constructed. He spends 18 to 24 months in each city. Targets 1 primary victim, sometimes 2. Extracts between 300,000 and 800,000 per victim. Then he moves on before anyone connects the dots. I studied the timeline. Boston 2008 to 2010. Miami 2010 to 2012. Dallas 2012 to 2014. Phoenix 2014 to 2017. Atlanta 2017 hasta 2019. Chicago 2019. Present. He's been in Chicago for 5 years, I said. That's longer than anywhere else. Because Chicago is his endgame. David clicked to another document, a real estate listing. He's been shopping for property in Costa Rica. Beachfront compound, 8 bedrooms, private dock. Asking price, $6.2 million. He made an inquiry 3 weeks ago. He's planning to run, Charlie said. He's planning to retire. David's voice was grim. One more big score, and he disappears forever. No extradition treaty with Costa Rica for financial crimes. He could live like a king for the rest of his life. Ray walked to the window, staring out at the Chicago skyline. Your wife isn't just another victim, Marcus. She's his exit strategy. The words hit me like a physical blow. Vicky wasn't a conquest. She was a lottery ticket. Julian had spent 5 years building his reputation in Chicago, cultivating connections, establishing himself as a pillar of the medical community. And now, he was ready to cash out. How much could he take from her? I asked. David consulted his notes. Victoria Whitfield, CFO of Northwestern Memorial Hospital System. Personal assets. Joint savings approximately $400,000. Retirement accounts approximately $800,000. Equity in your Lincoln Park brownstone approximately $1.2 million. But that's not the real target. Then what is? Her position. David pulled up an organizational chart. As CFO, she has signatory authority over hospital operating accounts, emergency discretionary funds, capital improvement budgets. If Julian can convince her to borrow from institutional accounts for his fake investment even temporarily, we're talking tens of millions. The room went silent. He wouldn't, I said. But even as I spoke, I knew I was wrong. 6 months ago, I would have said Vicky would never have an affair, would never lie to me, would never transfer $240,000 to a stranger's shell company. I didn't know what she was capable of anymore. We need to move faster, Charlie said. If he's planning to run, we don't have 18 months. We might not have 18 weeks. Agreed. Ray turned from the window. I've got a contact at the FBI. Former partner from my CPD days who transferred to the Bureau's Financial Crimes Unit. Her name is Special Agent Diana Reyes. She's been tracking Julian for 2 years, but hasn't had enough evidence to move. Until now, I said. Until now. Ray nodded. I'll reach out today. If we can coordinate with federal investigators, we might be able to build a RICO case. Wire fraud, mail fraud, money laundering, conspiracy. Julian Mercer won't just lose his freedom. He'll lose everything. I looked at the documents spread across Charlie's table. The shell companies, the victims, the Costa Rica compound, the man who had seduced my wife and stolen my money and was planning to disappear into the sunset with millions more. Do it, I said. Make the call. Ray pulled out his phone. The hunt was on. The numbers don't lie. That's what my father used to say when he reviewed contracts at his law firm. People lie. Witnesses lie. Even photographs can lie. But the numbers always tell the truth. David Chen had pulled our financial records going back 18 months. Every account Vicky and I shared, every credit card statement, every wire transfer and automatic payment and ATM withdrawal, the paper trail of a 23-year marriage, reduced to spreadsheets and transaction logs. The first transfer was April 23rd, David said, highlighting a line on his laptop screen. $50,000 from your joint savings to an account at First Republic Bank. The receiving account is registered to Lakeshore Medical Innovations, LLC. I never saw this, I said. I check our accounts every month. You check the primary checking account. This came from a secondary savings account, one your wife opened in 2019. It's linked to your joint accounts, but has separate login credentials. David pulled up another screen. She's been moving money in small increments. 10,000 here, 15,000 there. Always below the threshold that would trigger automatic fraud alerts. Charlie was taking notes on a legal pad, her pen moving in sharp, precise strokes. She's been trained. Someone taught her how to avoid detection. Julian. Ray stood behind David, studying the screen. He's done this before. He knows exactly how much you can move without raising red flags. David scrolled through the transactions. April 23rd, 50,000. May 15th, 35,000. June 8th, 40,000. July 2nd, 25,000. August 19th, 45,000. September 30th, 45,000. Total, $240,000 over 6 months. I stared at the numbers. $240,000. Money we'd saved for Derek's future, for our retirement, for the life we were supposed to build together. Gone. Transferred to a shell company in the Cayman Islands, funding Julian Mercer's escape to Costa Rica. There's more, David said quietly. More transfers? No. Worse. He clicked to a new document, an email printout. I found this in the metadata of one of the wire transfer confirmations. It was sent from your wife's hospital email address to Julian's personal account, dated September 15th. The email was brief. Asterisk. The Q3 discretionary fund closes October 31st. Approximately $2. 4M. Unallocated. I can authorize a consulting fee to LMI for the AI surgical project, no board approval required under $500K. We discussed starting with $400K. Let me know the invoice details. Asterisk. Asterisk. Miss you. Thursday. Can't come soon enough. Asterisk. The room went silent. She's planning to steal from the hospital, Charlie said. Her voice was flat, controlled. but I could see the shock in her eyes. $400,000 of institutional funds. That's federal wire fraud, Ray added. The moment she transfers hospital money to Julian's LLC, she becomes a co-conspirator. She could face 10 to 20 years. I read the email again. The casual tone. The miss you at the end. The way she signed it with just a V. Like she was writing to a lover, not a criminal. This wasn't the woman I married. Vicky was meticulous, ethical. She'd built her career on integrity, on being the CFO who caught discrepancies and flagged irregularities. She'd fired employees for expense report fraud, and now she was planning to embezzle $400,000 for a man she'd known for 6 months. Julian didn't just seduce her, I said slowly. He reprogrammed her. David nodded. It's a classic coercive control pattern. Isolation from family and friends, creating dependency, normalizing increasingly unethical behavior. By the time victims realize what they've done, they're in too deep to turn back. The affair is the leverage, Ray explained. Once she transferred the first $50,000, she was compromised. If she reports the fraud, she has to explain how she knows Julian. If she tells you about the affair, she has to explain the missing money. He's trapped her in a web where every escape route leads to destruction. I thought about the past 6 months, the late meetings, the weekend conferences, the way Vicky had seemed distant, preoccupied, always checking her phone. I'd assumed it was work stress. The hospital was going through a merger. Budgets were tight. Of course she was distracted. I'd been so blind. What happens if she makes that transfer? I asked. The $400,000? Charlie set down her pen. If she authorizes institutional funds to Julian's LLC, she commits federal wire fraud. Even if we catch Julian, even if we recover the money, Vicky faces criminal prosecution. Her career is over. Her freedom is at risk. She paused. And as her spouse, you could be implicated. Community property laws, joint tax returns. A prosecutor could argue you benefited from the fraud, so we have to stop her before October 31st. We have to stop Julian before October 31st, Ray corrected. If we can expose his pattern, prove he's a serial predator who manipulated her, Vicky becomes a victim, not a co-conspirator. The FBI might offer her immunity in exchange for testimony. Might. It's the best option we have. I looked at the email again. October 31st. 16 days away. 16 days to build a federal case, coordinate with the FBI, and take down a con artist who'd been perfecting his craft for over a decade. Can we do it? I asked. Ray met my eyes. We don't have a choice. Dr. Meredith Sinclair answered on the 4th ring. This is Meredith. Her voice was cautious, professional. The voice of a woman who had learned to be careful about unknown numbers. Dr. Sinclair, my name is Marcus Whitfield. I'm calling from Chicago. I believe we have someone in common. A long pause. I could hear her breathing change. How did you get this number? A private investigator. My brother. I glanced at Ray, who nodded encouragement. I know about Julian Mercer. I know what he did to you in Boston. And it's Sia Matterpergina, and I'm calling because he's doing the same thing to my wife. Another pause. Longer this time. Then, are you recording this conversation? No. But I can if you want documentation. No. Her voice softened slightly. No recordings. I signed an NDA as part of my settlement. If Julian finds out I'm talking to anyone, she trailed off. He won't find out. I promise. I heard what sounded like a door closing. When Meredith spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. What do you want to know? Everything. I wanted to know everything. But I started with the basics. How did you meet him? Medical conference. San Diego, 2008. He was presenting on neural pathway, mapping brilliant work, genuinely groundbreaking. I was CFO at Boston Medical Center. We ended up at the same dinner, same table. He was charming, attentive, asked questions about hospital administration like he actually cared about the answers. The pattern. Exactly what Ray had described. He followed up with emails. Meredith continued. Professional at first, then personal, then, with not professional at all. My marriage was already struggling. My husband traveled constantly. Julian made me feel seen, important, desired. She laughed bitterly. God, I was such a cliché. You were targeted, I said. There's a difference. That's what my therapist says. A pause. The affair lasted 8 months. Then he introduced the investment opportunity. A surgical robotics startup. He had prototypes, business plans, projected returns. Everything looked legitimate. He even arranged for me to meet other investors, people who turned out to be actors. I later discovered, how much did you invest? $520,000. Everything in my personal savings. Plus, her voice caught, plus $80,000 from a hospital discretionary fund. I told myself I was borrowing it, that I'd pay it back when the investment returned, but the returns never came. And Julian disappeared, moved to Miami, changed his phone number. The company dissolved overnight. I was left with nothing. No money, no proof, no way to explain what had happened without admitting the affair. I thought about Vicky's email. The Q3 discretionary fund, $400,000. You took money from the hospital, I said carefully. What happened? Meredith was quiet for a moment. I confessed to my CEO, resigned before they could fire me, paid back the $80,000 from my retirement accounts. They agreed not to press charges in exchange for my silence. Another bitter laugh. Everyone wanted silence. The hospital didn't want a scandal. I didn't want prison. And Julian counted on all of it. Did you try to find him? To press charges? I hired a private investigator. He traced Julian to Miami, but by then Julian had a new name, a new job, a new victim. My lawyer said a civil suit would drag everything into public view, the affair, the theft, all of it. My career would be over. My marriage was already finished. So I took the settlement and tried to rebuild. Her voice hardened. But I've kept track of him. Google alerts, court records. I know about Patricia in Miami, Elena in Dallas, Sarah in Phoenix, Amanda in Atlanta. Every time I see another woman's name, I think, if I'd been braver, if I'd gone public, if I'd warned someone. You're warning me now. I'm trying. Meredith took a deep breath. Mr. Whitfield, your wife isn't just having an affair. She's being systematically dismantled. Julian doesn't just take money, he takes identity. By the time he's done, she won't recognize herself. I closed my eyes. That's what I'd seen in the surveillance footage. Vicky, laughing at Julian's jokes. Vicky, reapplying lipstick without hesitation. Vicky planning to steal $400,000 like it was a routine budget transfer. How do I stop him? You can't appeal to her, Meredith said firmly. Not yet. She's too deep in his control. If you confront her, she'll warn him. If you threaten him, he'll accelerate his exit. The only way to break the spell is to break Julian. The FBI is building a case. Wire fraud. Money laundering. RICO charges. Good. For the first time, Meredith's voice held something like hope. Then make sure they have everything. Every victim. Every transaction. Every lie. Julian has been untouchable because we were all too ashamed to speak. But if you can get us together, if you can show a pattern of predation across multiple states, would you testify? Silence. I could almost hear her weighing the cost. The NDA. The public exposure. The memories she'd spent years trying to bury. If it means stopping him. She said finally, yes, I'll testify. I'll tell them everything. Alaven. Thing. I'll tell them everything. Thanks for watching. I'll see the subscribe to Coming Take to the End Stains. Thank you. Dr. Sinclair. Meredith. Her voice was stronger now. Call me Meredith. And Mr. Whitfield? Marcus. Destroy him. For all of us. The line went dead. I set down the phone and looked at Ray. We have our first witness. Charlie's corner office on LaSalle Street had witnessed the dissolution of over 300 marriages. Titans of industry, celebrity couples, old money dynasties, they'd all sat in the same leather chair where I now found myself, learning how to dismantle the lives they'd built. First things first, Charlie said, closing the blinds against the afternoon sun. We need to protect your assets before Vicky realizes you know anything. She slid a stack of documents across her mahogany desk. Post-it flags marked the signature lines. Yellow for immediate action. Red for contingency. Blue for the nuclear option. I've drafted an emergency motion to freeze your joint accounts. The moment we file for divorce, this goes to a judge. Given the documented fraud, we should get a temporary restraining order within 48 hours. But we're not filing for divorce yet, I said. Not until Julian is in custody. Correct. Which is why we're doing something else first. Charlie pulled out a separate folder. Post-nuptial asset protection. Perfectly legal. You're transferring your architecture firm into a family trust, specifically a trust administered by me. Your share of the brownstone goes into the same structure. Your retirement accounts get rolled into a protected IRA that requires dual signatures for withdrawal. Won't Vicky notice? She might. But these are standard estate planning moves. If she asks, you tell her your accountant recommended it for tax purposes. By the time she realizes the real reason, the assets will be untouchable. Ray stood by the window, watching the street below. What about the money she's already transferred? The $240,000? Gone, Charlie said flatly. At least for now. It's in a Cayman Islands trust controlled by Julian's shell company. We might recover some of it if the FBI seizes his assets, but that could take years. The priority now is stopping the bleeding. She turned to me, her expression softening. Marcus, I need to ask you something difficult. Go ahead. What do you want out of this? Not the investigation, the marriage. When the dust settles, when Julian is in prison and the accounts are sorted. What do you want? I'd been avoiding that question for days. Every time it surfaced, I pushed it back down, focusing on the next task, the next document, the next piece of evidence. Easier to be an investigator than a husband. Easier to analyze patterns than feelings. I don't know, I admitted. That's not good enough. Charlie leaned forward. I need to know if we're building a case for divorce or separation, if we're pursuing full asset recovery or negotiated settlement, if you want custody considerations for Derek, or Derek is 21. There's no custody. There's inheritance. There's family dynamics. There's the question of whether you want your son to have a relationship with his mother after this. Charlie's voice was gentle, but firm. These decisions affect strategy, Marcus. I can't protect you if I don't know what you're protecting. I stared at the documents on her desk. The post-it flags, the signature lines, the legal architecture of ending a marriage. 6 months ago, I would have said I'd forgive anything, I said slowly. Vicky and I, we built something real. 23 years. A son. A life. I thought that meant something. It did mean something. But now, I shook my head. It's not just the affair. Affairs happen. People make mistakes. But the lying, the stealing, the way she looked at him in that footage, like he was the only person in the world, I swallowed hard. She's planning to commit federal crimes for him, Charlie. She's willing to destroy everything we built: her career, her freedom, our family, for a man who sees her as nothing but a bank account. So divorce. Divorce. The word felt heavy, final. But I want her to have a chance at redemption first. If the FBI offers immunity, if she testifies against Julian, if she shows genuine remorse, maybe we can end this without destroying her completely. Charlie nodded slowly. Then here's the strategy. We protect your assets now, quietly. We coordinate with the FBI to build the strongest possible case against Julian. When the arrest happens, we approach Vicky with a choice. Cooperate fully, testify against Julian, and accept an uncontested divorce, with fair division of remaining assets, or refuse, face potential prosecution as a co-conspirator, and fight a legal battle she cannot win. You think she'll cooperate? I think she'll have no choice. Charlie gathered the documents. Julian's control depends on isolation. The moment she realizes she's not alone, that there are other victims, that the FBI is involved, that her husband knows everything, his spell breaks. She'll see him for what he is, and she'll want revenge just as badly as you do. Ray turned from the window. What about the hospital transfer? The $400,000? That's the FBI's problem now. Diana Reyes is fast-tracking the investigation. If we can get Julian on wire before October 31st, Vicky never makes that transfer. She stays a victim, not a perpetrator. And if we can't, Charlie's expression hardened. Then we make sure every piece of evidence we have shows she was coerced, manipulated, and controlled by a serial predator. We build a defense before she needs one. She pushed the yellow flag documents toward me. Sign these. All of them. Tonight, your assets become untouchable. I picked up the pen. 23 years of marriage, reduced to signatures and legal maneuvers. But somewhere beneath the grief, something else stirred. Clarity. Purpose. The cold, focused calm that had carried me through FBI interrogations and architectural disasters and every other crisis I'd ever faced. Julian Mercer had taken my wife. I was going to take everything else. October 19th, 11:47 p.m. I waited until Vicky was in bed, her reading glasses folded on the nightstand, her phone charging face down the way it always did now. Face down. I'd never noticed that detail before. For 23 years, she'd left her phone face up. When had that changed? I sat in my study, watching the minutes tick past on my grandfather's clock. The same clock that had marked time in my father's office. The same clock that would now mark the beginning of the end. At 11:52 p.m., I walked upstairs. Vicky was propped against the pillows, reading a hospital budget report. She looked up when I entered, that familiar smile crossing her face. The smile I'd fallen in love with, the smile that now felt like a mask. "You're up late," she said. "Couldn't sleep." I sat on the edge of the bed. My side. The side I'd occupied for over 8,000 nights. I knew every spring in that mattress, every creak in the frame. I knew the way Vicky's weight shifted when she turned toward me, the sound of her breathing when she finally drifted off. I knew this woman, and I didn't know her at all. "Vicky, we need to talk." Something flickered in her eyes. Fear? Guilt? It vanished so quickly I couldn't be sure. About what? I pulled out my phone, opened the photo gallery, selected the image Ray had given me, the one from April 17th, the Langham Hotel. Vicky in the white bathrobe, with Julian's arms around her waist. I turned the screen toward her. About this. The color drained from her face. I watched it happen in real time. The blood retreating, the mask crumbling, the careful construction of her double life collapsing in a single instant. "Marcus, don't." My voice was steady, calm. The calm I'd practiced for days, rehearsing this moment in my mind. "Don't lie to me. Not now. Not after everything." She stared at the photo. Her hands trembled. The budget report slipped from her fingers and fell to the floor. "How did you? Does it matter? I can explain. Can you?" I swiped to the next image. The Langham lobby. Julian's silver Porsche. The elevator footage. Can you explain 6 months of Tuesdays and Thursdays? Can you explain $240,000 transferred to a shell company in the Cayman Islands? Her eyes went wide. "You know about the money?" "I know everything, Vicky. The affair, the fraud, Julian's 5 other victims, the fake investment scheme, the Costa Rica compound he's planning to buy with your retirement fund." I set the phone down. "I know about the email you sent on September 15th. The $400,000 you're planning to steal from the hospital." She started crying then. Not the elegant, controlled tears she deployed at funerals and sad movies. These were ugly tears, desperate tears, the tears of a woman watching her entire world burn. "It's not what you think," she whispered. "Then tell me what it is." "Julian. He's not a con artist. He's a visionary. The surgical AI project is real. The returns are real. He showed me the prototypes, the partnerships. He showed you lies." I kept my voice level. The same lies he showed Meredith Sinclair in Boston, Patricia Vance in Miami, Elena Rodriguez in Dallas. Every woman he's destroyed for the past 15 years. "No." She shook her head violently. "No, that's not true. Julian loves me. He's leaving his wife for me. We're going to start over together. Somewhere beautiful. Somewhere. Costa Rica?" She froze. "He told you about the beach house, didn't he? The 8-bedroom compound with the private dock? The place where you'd live happily ever after, while I wondered what happened to my wife and my money and my life?" The tears kept falling, but something else crept into her expression. Doubt. The first crack in Julian's carefully constructed reality. He said you'd never understand, that you were too focused on work to see what was right in front of you, that I deserved someone who appreciated me, and you believed him. I believed what I wanted to believe. Her voice broke. "Our marriage. Marcus, we haven't been happy for years. You know that. We go through the motions. We say the right things. But the passion is gone. The connection is gone." Julian made me feel alive again. He made me feel wanted. I sat with that for a moment. The accusation. The truth buried inside it. "You're right," I said finally. "We lost something. Somewhere along the way, we stopped paying attention. We let work and routine and exhaustion crowd out everything else." I paused. "But you know what I never did, Vicky? I never lied to you. I never stole from you. I never planned to abandon you for a con artist's fantasy." She flinched like I'd slapped her. "What happens now?" she whispered. I stood, walked to the door, turned back. "Now you have a choice. The FBI is building a case against Julian. Wire fraud, money laundering, RICO charges. They're going to arrest him, Vicky. Soon. And when they do, everyone will know what he is and what you helped him do. I'll go to prison, maybe. Or maybe you cooperate. Testify against him. Help bring down a predator who's destroyed dozens of lives. The FBI might offer immunity. A good lawyer might keep you out of prison. And us?" I looked at my wife. "This stranger I'd loved for half my life. There is no us anymore. You made that choice 6 months ago." I walked out without looking back. Behind me, I heard her sobbing. The sound followed me down the stairs, through the kitchen, out the back door, into the October cold. I stood in our garden, breathing frost, waiting. My phone buzzed. A text from Ray. Asterisk. "Did you plant it?" Asterisk. I looked back at the house. At the bedroom window, where Vicky's silhouette moved against the light. Asterisk. "Yes. The recorder is in the nightstand drawer. If she calls Julian tonight, we'll have everything." Asterisk. She called him at 12:34 a.m. I was sitting in my car 3 blocks away. Ray's laptop open on the passenger seat. The recording software displaying real-time audio waves. The hidden device in our nightstand was military grade, a gift from one of Ray's former colleagues at CPD. The kind of equipment that picked up whispers from across a room. Vicky's voice came through crystal clear. "Julian, it's me. You need to call me back. Right now. Something's happened." She was pacing. I could hear her footsteps on the hardwood. Back and forth, back and forth. The familiar creak of the loose board near the bathroom door. Marcus knows. He knows everything. The affair, the money, your other women. He has photographs. He has bank records. He says the FBI is building a case. A pause. The sound of her blowing her nose. I don't know what to do. He's talking about divorce. About me going to prison. Julian, please, call me. I need you. She hung up. Ray leaned over from the driver's seat. That's useful, but it's not enough. We need Julian's response. We need him to confirm the scheme on tape. Give it time. We waited. The October wind rocked the car gently. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked. I watched the audio monitor, waiting for the spike that would indicate another call. At 1:17 a.m., her phone rang. Julian? Vicky's voice was thick with tears and relief. Thank God. I've been calling for. Calm down. Julian's voice was smooth, controlled. The voice of a man who had talked his way out of crises before. Tell me exactly what he said. He showed me photos. From the Langham. From April. He knows about the transfers, all of them. He mentioned the other women by name. Meredith something. Patricia. Elena. A pause. When Julian spoke again, his tone had shifted. Harder. Calculating. Did he mention the FBI specifically? Yes. He said they're building a case. Wire fraud. Money laundering. Something called RICO. Did he mention a specific agent? A timeline? Any names from the Bureau? No. Just that they know. Julian, what do we do? I leaned closer to the laptop. This was it. The moment Julian would either reassure her with more lies or reveal his true nature. He chose option 2. Listen to me carefully, Victoria. How much have you transferred so far? 240,000. You know this. And the hospital funds? The Q3 discretionary transfer we discussed? I haven't done it yet. The authorization window opens on October 31st. Move it up. Julian's voice was urgent now, the charm evaporating. Can you do an emergency transfer? Claim it's for a time-sensitive vendor payment? Maybe. But Julian, Marcus said. Forget what Marcus said. Your husband is bluffing. He doesn't have FBI contacts. He's an architect. He probably hired some cut-rate private investigator who dug up old news stories. The photos don't prove fraud. The transfers went to a legitimate LLC. There's nothing actionable. You sound so sure. I've dealt with suspicious husbands before. Julian laughed. It was an ugly sound. They threaten, they bluster, they hire lawyers. Then they settle for half the assets and move on with their lives. Marcus will do the same. The question is whether we extract maximum value before he does. Vicky was quiet for a moment. Extract maximum value? The hospital transfer. Victoria, if you can push it through this week, even 200,000 instead of 4, we accelerate our timeline. I have a buyer for the Costa Rica property who needs confirmation by month's end. Once the funds clear, we disappear. New names, new country, new life. I watched Ray's expression harden. This was exactly what we needed. Julian was confirming the scheme, the escape plan, the intent to defraud, all on a recorded line. But Vicky's response surprised me. Julian. The other women. The ones Marcus mentioned. Did you love them too? Silence. Did you tell them what you told me? That they were special? That you'd never felt this way before? That you were leaving your wife for them? Victoria, answer me. Julian's voice shifted again. Softer now. Manipulative. None of them were like you. They were practice. Trial runs. I was learning how to recognize real love when I found it. And I found it with you. That's not an answer. It's the only answer that matters. His tone sharpened. Now listen. I need you to focus. The hospital transfer. Can you do it this week or not? Another long pause. I'll see what I can do. Vicky said finally. Good. I'll call you tomorrow with the invoice details. And Victoria, delete this call. Delete all our messages. Clear your browser history. If Marcus is watching, and he probably is, we need to go dark until the money clears. Okay, I love you. The words hung in the air like poison. I love you too. The line went dead. Ray was already copying the audio file to a secure server. That's enough for wire fraud conspiracy. Maybe enough for attempted theft. Combined with the other victim's testimony, it's a solid RICO foundation. I stared at the laptop screen. The audio waves had flattened back to silence. My wife had just agreed to accelerate the theft of hospital funds for a man who saw her as nothing but a final payday. Forward everything to Agent Reyes, I said. Tonight. Already done. Ray closed the laptop. The FBI will want to move fast now. Julian spooked. If he thinks the walls are closing in, he might run before we're ready. I started the car. Then we make sure he doesn't get the chance. Special Agent Diana Reyes had the kind of eyes that made guilty people confess before she asked a single question. Dark, steady, unblinking, the eyes of someone who had heard every lie and seen through all of them. We met at a coffee shop in the West Loop, neutral ground, 7:15 a.m. Ray had made the introduction through secure channels. No names over the phone, no details in email, just a time, a place, and a photograph so I'd recognize her. She was already seated when I arrived, a black coffee untouched in front of her, a leather portfolio closed on the table. Mr. Whitfield. She didn't stand or offer her hand. Sit down. I sat. Ray speaks highly of you, she said. He says you were FBI before you were an architect. Financial Crimes Division. 8 years. I left in 2006. I know. I pulled your file. She finally took a sip of her coffee. Clean record. Good clearance rate. You left to start your own firm. Married Victoria Chen, now Whitfield, in 2001. One son, Derek. Age 21. Net worth approximately $3.4 million. Most of it in real estate and retirement accounts. You've done your homework. I always do. She opened the portfolio and spread several photographs across the table. Julian Mercer, at various locations, the Langham, Northwestern Memorial, a charity gala, a restaurant I didn't recognize. We've been watching Dr. Mercer for 26 months. 3 field offices, 4 assistant U.S. attorneys, and until last night, not enough evidence to make an arrest. And now? Now we have a recorded confession of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, interstate transportation of stolen property, and money laundering. She tapped her phone, which sat face up on the table. Your brother forwarded the audio at 2:47 a.m. My team has been analyzing it since sunrise. Is it enough? It's a start. Diana leaned back in her chair. The problem with Julian Mercer isn't evidence. It's jurisdiction. He operates across state lines, uses offshore accounts, and targets victims who are too ashamed to cooperate. Every time we get close, he moves. New city, new name, new LLC. By the time we build a case, the trail has gone cold. But this time is different. This time we have something we've never had before. Her eyes met mine. A victim who doesn't know she's cooperating, and a husband who's willing to help us catch him in the act. I understood what she was asking. The coffee shop suddenly felt smaller, the ambient noise fading to static. You want me to wear a wire. I want you to attend the Northwestern Memorial Hospital Foundation Gala on October 26th. Black tie. 500 donors. Julian Mercer will be there. He's on the planning committee. Your wife will be there too, as CFO. Diana slid a printed invitation across the table. We've arranged for you to have a private conversation with Dr. Mercer. A conversation about investment opportunities. He'll be suspicious. He knows I'm investigating him. He knows your wife told you about the affair. He doesn't know about the FBI. He doesn't know about the other victims we've contacted. And he doesn't know that his escape plan to Costa Rica has already been flagged by international authorities. Diana's smile was cold. Julian Mercer thinks he's the smartest person in every room. That arrogance is his weakness. If you approach him as a potential investor, a wealthy architect looking for tax-advantaged opportunities, his greed will override his caution. Ray had warned me this might happen. The FBI didn't just want Julian arrested. They wanted him destroyed. Every asset seized. Every victim compensated. Every future target protected. To do that, they needed Julian on tape, in his own words, pitching his fraud to a new mark. They needed me to be the bait. What exactly do I have to do? Diana pulled a document from her portfolio. Express interest in Lakeshore Medical Innovations. Ask about returns, timelines, minimum investments. Get him talking about the AI surgical project, the partnerships, the exit strategy. The more specific he gets, the stronger our case. And if he suspects something, then you walk away. We have backup plans. She paused. But Mr. Whitfield, I won't lie to you. This is the cleanest path. If Julian pitches you directly, on tape, at a public event, we can arrest him the same night. Your wife never makes the hospital transfer. She becomes a witness instead of a defendant. Everyone wins. Everyone except Julian. I thought about Vicky. About the woman who had sat across from me at 1,000 dinners, who had held my hand when my father died, who had cried with joy when Derek took his first steps. She was still in there somewhere, buried beneath Julian's manipulation. This was the only way to bring her back. I'll do it, Diana nodded, as if she'd expected nothing else. We'll have a team at the gala. Plainclothes agents, undercover servers, surveillance on every exit. The moment Julian incriminates himself, we move. You won't be in danger. What about Vicky? What about her? If Julian is arrested at the gala, in front of 500 people, in front of her colleagues and hospital board members, her career is over. Diana's expression didn't change. Her career became collateral damage the moment she transferred $240,000 to a Cayman Islands shell company. We can't undo that, Mr. Whitfield. We can only control what happens next. She gathered her documents and stood. The gala is in 6 days. We'll be in touch with operational details. She extended her hand for the first time. Thank you for your cooperation. What you're doing will save lives. Women who would have been Julian's future victims. Families who would have been destroyed. I shook her hand. Her grip was firm, professional, final. One question, I said. How many victims have you identified? Total? Diana paused at the edge of the table. Confirmed? 5. Suspected? She looked at me with those unblinking eyes. At least 12, possibly more. Julian Mercer has been doing this for 15 years. Some women never come forward. Some don't even realize they've been scammed until years later. She walked out without another word. I sat alone with my cold coffee, watching the morning traffic flow past the window. 6 days until the gala. 6 days until I faced the man who had stolen my wife. 6 days until everything ended. The device was smaller than I expected. Latest generation, said the FBI tech specialist, a young woman named Sarah who couldn't have been older than Derek. She held up what looked like a standard shirt button, matte black, slightly thicker than normal, transmits on an encrypted frequency, range of 1/2 mile. Battery life, 14 hours. Completely undetectable to standard RF sweeps. We were in a nondescript office building on South Dearborn. 3 floors of government-leased space that officially didn't exist. Diana Reyes stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the training session with the same unblinking intensity she'd shown at the coffee shop. The button replaces the second one down on your dress shirt, Sarah continued. We'll sew it in ourselves. The microphone picks up everything within 15 feet. Normal conversation. Whispers. Even breath patterns. What if he touches me? Pats me on the back. Shakes my hand too long. He won't feel anything unusual. The electronics are distributed through the fabric lining. Even if he hugged you, which he won't, he's too careful. There's nothing to detect. I'd worn wires before, back in my FBI days. Bulky transmitters taped to my chest, battery packs strapped to my lower back. This was different, elegant, almost invisible. Almost. Walk me through the scenario again, I said. Diana stepped forward. You arrive at 7:45 p.m. The gala officially starts at 8. Cocktail hour runs until 9, followed by dinner and speeches. Based on our surveillance, Julian typically works the room during cocktails. That's when he identifies potential marks. And that's when I approach him? No. You let him come to you. Diana pulled up a seating chart on her tablet. We've arranged for you to be seated at table 7. That's the architecture and development donors table. Julian's been placed at table 12, the medical innovation sponsors. But during cocktails, he circulates. We've seeded information that Marcus Whitfield, founder of a successful architecture firm, recently liquidated some commercial properties and is looking for alternative investments. You planted bait. We created an opportunity. Julian monitors Chicago's business press. He'll have seen the articles about your firm's expansion, your Lincoln Park brownstone, your net worth. When he sees you at the gala, alone, approachable, he won't be able to resist. Sarah handed me a printed script, key phrases, conversation starters, questions designed to elicit specific responses. Don't memorize this, she said. Just absorb the themes. We need Julian to mention the LLC by name, describe the investment structure, and ideally reference previous investors or returns. The more specifics, the better. I scanned the document. Asterisk. I've been looking at healthcare technology. I heard there are some interesting AI startups. What kind of returns are we talking about? Is this something I could get into quickly? Asterisk. The language of greed. The vocabulary of Marx. What about Vicky? I asked. Diana's expression didn't change. What about her? She'll be at the gala. She'll see me talking to Julian. She'll know something is wrong. Your wife has been avoiding you for 3 days, correct? Sleeping in the guest room? Leaving before you wake? Coming home after you're asleep? I nodded. Since the confrontation, Vicky and I had become ghosts in our own home. We occupied the same space, but existed in different dimensions. She won't approach you at the gala. She can't risk being seen with both of you in public. It would raise questions about how you know Julian. She'll keep her distance. And if she doesn't, then our agents will create a distraction. A spilled drink. A medical emergency. Something to separate you. Diana's voice softened, just slightly. Mr. Whitfield, I understand. This is difficult. You're about to destroy your wife's lover in front of 500 people who respect her professionally. But the alternative is watching her destroy herself. The hospital transfer, the federal charges, prison time. I know. Then trust the process. We've done this before. Not with these exact circumstances, but with similar operations. Julian Mercer is arrogant, predictable, and greedy. He'll take the bait. Sarah attached the button to a dress shirt identical to ones I owned. Try this on. We need to test the audio levels. Unknown. I changed in the small bathroom adjacent to the office. The shirt felt normal, same weight, same fit, same texture. The button sat against my chest, unremarkable, invisible. When I emerged, Sarah was monitoring a laptop showing real-time audio waveforms. Say something, she said. Testing. 1, 2, 3. The waveforms spiked perfectly. My voice came through the laptop speakers, clear and crisp. Now whisper. Testing. Still clear. Now turn away from me and speak toward the wall. Testing. A slight reduction in volume, but still audible. Perfect. Sarah smiled. You're ready. Diana handed me a folder containing my gala credentials, table assignment, and a list of talking points about the fictional property sale that had generated my investable capital. October 26th, she said. 7:45 p.m. We'll have a team in position by 6. Once Julian engages, just keep him talking. Our agents will handle the rest. I tucked the folder under my arm. What happens after the arrest? To Vicky? Diana was quiet for a moment. That depends on how cooperative she is. If she agrees to testify, if she provides documentation of Julian's methods, she may avoid prosecution entirely. But that conversation happens after he's in custody, not before. She doesn't know about the wire. about any of this, and she can't know. Julian is already paranoid. If Vicky shows any sign that something is planned, he'll disappear. New identity, new country. We'll never find him. I thought about the woman I'd married. The woman who had shared my bed, raised my son, built a life beside me for 23 years. In 6 days, I would betray her to save her. I understand, I said. Diana nodded. We'll be in touch with final preparations. Get some rest, Mr. Whitfield. You're going to need it. I walked out into the gray Chicago afternoon, the weight of the button against my chest like a second heartbeat. 6 days. 5 now. The countdown had begun. The Peninsula Hotel ballroom glittered like a cathedral of wealth. Crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across 500 donors in black tie and evening gowns. A string quartet played Vivaldi in the corner. Waiters in white jackets circulated with champagne flutes and hors d'oeuvres arranged like edible art. The Northwestern Memorial Hospital Foundation had spared no expense. This was where Chicago's elite came to feel generous while writing tax-deductible checks. I arrived at 7:43 p.m., 2 minutes early. My tuxedo was rented, my shoes were polished, and the button on my chest recorded everything. Audio check. Diana's voice crackled through the microscopic earpiece hidden in my right ear. Say something casual. I accepted a champagne flute from a passing waiter. Thank you. Lovely evening. Crystal clear. We have eyes on you. Team Alpha, at the east entrance. Team Bravo covering the kitchen. Julian arrived 12 minutes ago. He's currently near the silent auction tables, third from the left. I didn't look. Not yet. The room was a maze of familiar faces, hospital board members I'd met at previous galas, architects who'd worked on medical facility projects, donors whose names adorned building wings and research centers. Normally, I would have worked the crowd, shaking hands, exchanging business cards, building relationships that might lead to future commissions. Tonight, I had only one target. I drifted toward the bar, positioning myself at an angle that allowed peripheral surveillance of the auction tables. And there he was, Dr. Julian Mercer. He was shorter than I'd expected from the photographs, maybe 5 to 10 in expensive Italian shoes. But he commanded space like a man twice his size. Silver hair swept back from a tanned forehead, perfect teeth flashing in a practiced smile, charcoal Armani suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. He was talking to a woman I recognized, Dr. Patricia Holloway, chief of neurology, a widow whose husband had left her a substantial estate. Julian's hand rested lightly on her arm as he leaned in, sharing some private joke that made her laugh. Hunting. Even now, even with the FBI closing in, he was hunting. Target acquired. I murmured into my champagne. Copy that. Take your time. Let him come to you. Easier said than done. Every instinct screamed at me to cross the room, grab Julian by his perfectly knotted tie, and demand answers. Where was my money? What had he done to my wife? How many other families had he destroyed? But I held position. Sipped champagne. Watched. At 8:17 p.m., I spotted Vicky. She emerged from the crowd near the stage, wearing the emerald Valentino gown I'd bought her for our 20th anniversary. Her hair was swept up, diamond earrings catching the light. She looked beautiful, radiant, like the woman I'd fallen in love with 25 years ago. She also looked terrified. Her eyes swept the room, searching, I realized, for Julian. When she found him, her expression flickered. Relief, longing, fear, the complicated emotional cocktail of a woman trapped between two worlds. Then she saw me. Our eyes met across 60 feet of champagne and small talk. For a moment, neither of us moved. I saw the calculation in her face, surprise, then confusion, then something that might have been hope. She took a step toward me. Abort approach, Diana's voice warned. We can't have her interfering. Before Vicky could take another step, a waiter stumbled near her, spilling a tray of canapes across her path. She stopped, flustered, helping the apologetic young man collect the scattered appetizers. By the time she looked up again, I had moved deeper into the crowd. FBI timing. Precise. As always. At 8:31 p.m., Julian noticed me. I was standing near a display about the hospital's new surgical robotics program, a calculated choice, Julian's supposed expertise. His hunting ground, he approached with the confidence of a man who had never been refused. Marcus Whitfield. His voice was warm, cultivated, designed to put people at ease. I've heard impressive things about your firm. The Morrison Tower project? Remarkable work. I turned, feigning pleasant surprise. Dr. Mercer, your reputation precedes you as well. The neural pathway research is groundbreaking. You follow medical innovation? I follow smart investments. I smiled. Architecture is steady money, but the real returns are in technology. Healthcare technology especially. Julian's eyes sharpened a predator-scenting opportunity. Is that so? Because I happen to know of a few opportunities that might interest a man of your resources. I'm listening. He glanced around, confirming we weren't being overheard. Then, he stepped closer, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial murmur. There's a private reception after the main event. Suite 1847 at the Langham. A few select investors discussing a surgical AI venture that's going to revolutionize the industry. He smiled. Ate on compassion. I'd love for you to join us. Suite 1847. The same suite, where he'd been meeting my wife for 6 months. My stomach turned. But I kept my expression neutral. Sounds interesting. What kind of numbers are we talking about? Minimum investment is $200,000. But the returns... Julian's smile widened. Let's just say my early investors have seen 40% annually. Tax-advantaged, offshore structured, completely confidential. He was pitching me. In a room full of witnesses, with an FBI wire recording every word. Tell me more, I said. And he did. Julian Mercer talked for 11 minutes. 11 minutes of lies delivered with the confidence of gospel truth. He described the AI surgical platform, a system that didn't exist. He named partnerships with Stanford and MIT, relationships that had never been formed. He quoted projected revenues and market valuations numbers invented from thin air. And I recorded every word. The beauty of the structure, Julian explained, swirling his whiskey, is the offshore component. Lakeshore Medical Innovations holds the intellectual property in a Cayman subsidiary. Returns flow through a Swiss intermediary before reaching investors. Completely legal, completely confidential, and completely untraceable to the IRS, I said, playing my part. Julian's smile widened. Let's just say my investors appreciate discretion. Medical professionals, hospital executives, people whose public positions require careful financial planning. People like my wife. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Julian's smile froze. For half a second, something flickered behind his eyes. Calculation. Suspicion. The predator sensing danger. I'm sorry? Victoria Whitfield, CFO of Northwestern Memorial. Your investor. Your lover. I set down my champagne glass. Your victim. The color drained from Julian's face. Around us, the gala continued laughter, music, the clink of crystal. But in our small pocket of space, the world had stopped. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. I know about the Langham, Suite 1847. Every Tuesday and Thursday for 6 months. I know about the $240,000 she transferred to your shell company. I know about Meredith Sinclair in Boston, Patricia Vance in Miami, Elena Rodriguez in Dallas. Julian's composure cracked. His eyes darted around the room, escape routes, witnesses, threats. The charm had evaporated, replaced by the cold calculation of a cornered animal. You're wearing a wire, he said. This is entrapment. No. This is justice. Julian moved fast, faster than I expected. He grabbed my collar, fingers clawing toward the button on my chest. But before he could tear it away, Two men in tuxedos materialized from the crowd. Dr. Mercer. Diana Reyes's voice was ice. She stepped between us, badge display. FBI. You're under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit interstate theft. You have the right to remain silent. The room noticed now. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. The string quartet faltered mid-phrase. "This is ridiculous," Julian sputtered, but his voice had lost its smoothness. "I'm a respected physician. I'll have your badge. You have the right to an attorney." Diana nodded to the agents flanking him. "If you cannot afford one, one will be provided." They cuffed him right there, in the middle of the Peninsula Ballroom, in front of 500 of Chicago's wealthiest donors. Julian struggled, protesting his innocence, demanding to speak with his lawyer, his hospital administrator, anyone who would listen. No one listened. And then I saw Vicky. She was standing near the stage, champagne glass frozen halfway to her lips. Her face was a mask of horror, watching the man she loved being dragged away in handcuffs, watching her husband standing beside the FBI, watching her entire carefully constructed fantasy collapse in real time. Our eyes met again. This time, there was no hope in her expression, only devastation. "Victoria Whitfield?" Another agent approached her, a woman in a conservative black dress who might have been a donor or a doctor or anyone else at this gala. "FBI. We need to ask you some questions. Please come with us." I don't understand. "Ma'am. This can be easy or difficult. Your choice." Vicky looked at me, looked at Julian, now being escorted through the kitchen exit to avoid the main lobby, looked at the agent waiting patiently beside her. 23 years of marriage. 23 years of shared meals and shared dreams and a son we'd raised together. And it all came down to this moment, my wife choosing between cooperation and destruction. "I'll answer your questions," Vicky said quietly. "But I want my lawyer present. That can be arranged." They led her away through a side door. She didn't look back. Diana appeared at my elbow. "Clean operation. We got everything we needed on tape. Julian's lawyers will try to suppress. But with Meredith's testimony and the financial records, he's looking at 20 to 25 years minimum. And Vicky? That depends on how cooperative she is tonight." Diana's voice softened marginally. "You did the right thing, Mr. Whitfield. It doesn't feel like it now. It won't feel like it for a while. But you saved your wife from making a mistake that would have destroyed her life." I watched the side door where Vicky had disappeared. The emerald Valentino gown, the diamond earrings, the woman I'd loved for half my life, walking away to face the consequences of choices I still didn't fully understand. "I saved her," I repeated. It felt like a lie. Around me, the gala slowly resumed. The string quartet found their rhythm again. Waiters circulated with fresh champagne. Chicago's elite returned to their conversations, already crafting the stories they would tell about the night doctor. Julian Mercer was arrested at the hospital benefit. I walked out alone. The October air was cold against my face. Somewhere across the city, my wife was sitting in an FBI interview room. Somewhere else, Julian Mercer was being processed into federal custody. And somewhere inside me, something had broken that would never quite heal. But it was done. The trap had sprung. The predator was caught. The federal detention center on South Clark Street smelled like desperation and disinfectant. I sat in a gray observation room, watching through one-way glass as Julian Mercer was processed into the system. The charcoal Armani had been replaced with an orange jumpsuit. The silver cufflinks were now evidence in a sealed bag. The practiced smile was gone, replaced by the hollow stare of a man finally confronting consequences. "Bail hearing is tomorrow morning," Diana said, standing beside me. "We're requesting remand flight risk, international assets, history of identity changes. Judge Morrison is presiding. She doesn't like con artists." "What are the charges?" 18 counts of wire fraud, 12 counts of money laundering, 6 counts of interstate transportation of stolen property, 1 count of conspiracy to commit bank fraud. Diana paused. "And we're adding more as we speak. Meredith Sinclair flew in from Boston tonight. She's ready to testify. We've also made contact with Patricia Vance in Miami and Elena Rodriguez in Dallas. They're cooperating. I watched Julian being fingerprinted. The man who had destroyed my marriage, reduced to ink and paper, and a number in the federal system. It should have felt like victory. What about Vicky? Diana's expression shifted something almost like sympathy. She's in interview room 3. Been there for 2 hours. Her lawyer arrived 40 minutes ago. Charlie? No. She hired outside counsel. A criminal defense attorney named Robert Huang. He's good. Expensive. The kind of lawyer you hire when you're scared. I thought about Vicky sitting in a federal interview room, facing questions about fraud and conspiracy, and the choices she'd made for a man who saw her as nothing but a bank account. Can I see her? Not yet. Not until the initial interview is complete. Diana turned to face me directly. Mr. Whitfield, I need to prepare you for something. Your wife has been cooperative. She's answered our questions, provided documentation, agreed to testify against Julian. That's good. It significantly reduces her criminal exposure. But during the interview, certain information came to light. Information that doesn't relate to the fraud case. My chest tightened. What kind of information? Diana was quiet for a moment. In the processing room, Julian was being led away to a holding cell. The door clanged shut behind him with the finality of a coffin lid. Your wife disclosed that her relationship with Julian Mercer was not her first extramarital affair. She mentioned a previous relationship approximately 22 years ago. A colleague at the hospital where she worked before joining Northwestern, 22 years ago. Derek was 21. The math assembled itself in my mind with brutal precision. She said something else. Diana continued carefully. Something she claims Julian used as leverage to deepen her dependence on him. A secret she'd been carrying for 2 decades. I knew what she was going to say before she said it. Your son, Derek. According to your wife's statement, there's a possibility that he may not be your biological child. The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. I heard them. I understood them. But some part of my brain refused to process their meaning. That's not possible. I'm only telling you what she disclosed. We're not in the business of family revelations. But Julian apparently discovered this information early in their relationship and used it to manipulate her. Threatened to tell you. Threatened to tell Derek. It was part of how he maintained control. I thought about my son. Derek's laugh, did it sound like mine? Derek's eyes were they really my father's eyes? As I'd always believed, Derek's talent for architecture, nature, or nurture. 21 years of fatherhood. 21 years of bedtime stories and baseball games and proud moments and difficult conversations. Was any of it real, Mr. Whitfield? Diana's voice seemed far away. Marcus, I need to confirm it. My voice sounded strange, flat, disconnected. A DNA test. I need to know for certain. That's your right. But I'd encourage you to think carefully about timing. Derek doesn't know any of this. Neither does the public. Once you open that door, I need to know. Diana nodded slowly. I can recommend a private laboratory. Discreet. Results in 48 hours. She handed me a business card. I'm sorry, Mr. Whitfield. This isn't what tonight was supposed to be about. I stared at the card. GeneTech Diagnostics. A phone number. An address in the loop. Can I ask you something? Of course. In your experience in all the cases you've worked, all the families you've seen destroyed, does knowing the truth actually help? Or does it just create new kinds of pain? Diana considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. The truth doesn't heal, she said finally. But lies metastasize. They grow. They poison everything they touch. I've seen families survive terrible truths. I've never seen one survive a lifetime of deception. She walked me to the exit. The October night was waiting. Cold and indifferent. Go home, Mr. Whitfield. Get some sleep. I stood on the sidewalk outside the Federal Detention Center, holding a business card that might destroy the last good thing I had left. My son. My Derek. Or maybe not mine at all. The envelope arrived 47 hours later. I sat at my desk in the study, the same desk where I'd drafted blueprints for the Morrison Tower, where I'd signed my marriage certificate, where I'd helped Derek with his homework 1,000 times. The GeneTech logo stared up at me from crisp white paper. Inside, a single sheet that would either confirm or destroy 21 years of fatherhood. Ray had offered to be here. So had Charlie. I'd declined both. Some truths are meant to be faced alone. I thought about Derek. His first steps in our living room. His first word, "da," spoken while reaching for me across his crib. His first day of kindergarten, when he'd clung to my leg and begged me not to leave. His graduation from high school. Valedictorian speech. Eyes finding mine in the crowd. His acceptance to Northwestern's architecture program, following in footsteps I'd assumed were genetically his to follow. Were any of those moments less real if our DNA didn't match? The question haunted me. I'd built my entire identity around being Derek's father. Not just legally, not just socially, but fundamentally. He was my legacy, my contribution to the future, the best thing I'd ever helped create. And Vicky had let me believe that lie for 21 years. I opened the envelope. The report was clinical, efficient. 3 pages of methodology and disclaimers before the result that mattered. Asterisk. Alleged father. Marcus Thomas. Whitfield. Asterisk. Asterisk. Child. Derek. James. Whitfield. Asterisk. Asterisk. Probability of paternity. 0%. Asterisk. 0%. Not a chance. Not a possibility. Not even a statistical margin of error. Derek was not my biological son. I read the number again. And again. As if repetition might change the mathematics. As if staring long enough might transform 0 into anything else. It didn't. I set down the report and walked to the window. Outside, October had turned the trees along our street into columns of fire. Red and gold and orange. The colors of endings. The colors of things burning away. 21 years. 7,683 days. Every birthday. Every Christmas. Every ordinary Tuesday when I came home and Derek was there, doing homework or playing video games or just existing in the space we shared. All of it built on a lie. My phone buzzed. A text from Derek. Asterisk. Hey Dad. Heard about the gala thing. Mom's not answering her phone. Is everything okay? Asterisk. I stared at the message. Dad. He still called me Dad. He didn't know. Couldn't know. The FBI had kept the DNA revelation out of the press. It wasn't relevant to the fraud case. Vicky's lawyer had sealed her interview transcripts. The only people who knew the truth were me, Vicky, and a handful of federal agents who had no reason to share it. I could keep the secret. Let Derek live his life, believing what he'd always believed. Protect him from a truth that would shatter his understanding of everything. But Diana's words echoed in my mind. Asterisk. Lies. Metastasize. They grow. They poison everything they touch. Asterisk. I'd spent the last 2 weeks hunting lies, exposing them, watching them destroy the people who'd built their lives around them. Could I now choose to maintain one, to become the very thing I'd fought against? My phone buzzed again. Asterisk. Dad? You there? Asterisk. I typed a response, deleted it, typed again. Asterisk. Everything is complicated right now. Can we meet tomorrow? Just us. The lakefront, our usual spot. 10 a.m. Asterisk. 3 dots appeared. Then, asterisk. Sure. You're scaring me a little, but I'll be there. Love you. Asterisk. Love you. I set down the phone and returned to the desk. The DNA report lay there. Clinical and final. 0%. But fatherhood had never been about percentages. I thought about the man who'd actually provided Derek's DNA. Some hospital colleague of Vicky's, 22 years ago. A name I didn't know. A face I'd never seen. He'd contributed chromosomes. That was all. He hadn't walked the floor with a colicky infant at 3 a.m. Hadn't taught a nervous 5-year-old to ride a bicycle. Hadn't sat through 100 architecture lectures to share his son's passion. I had done those things. Me, Marcus Whitfield. Not because of biology, because of choice. And tomorrow, I would give Derek the same choice. He deserved to know the truth. He deserved to decide for himself what that truth meant. He was 21, an adult, capable of processing difficult information, capable of choosing his own path forward. Maybe he would hate me for keeping the secret this long, even though I'd only learned it myself 47 hours ago. Maybe he would hate Vicky for the original deception. Maybe he would want to find his biological father. Maybe he would want nothing to do with any of us. Or maybe, just maybe, he would understand what I was only beginning to grasp myself. That family isn't built from blood. It's built from presence, from commitment, from showing up, day after day, year after year, choosing to love someone not because you have to, but because you want to. I picked up the DNA report and carried it to the fireplace, held it over the cold grate. One match, and the evidence would be ash. But I didn't light it. Instead, I folded the paper carefully and placed it in my desk drawer. Derek deserved to see it. Deserved to have the choice I'd never been given. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, I was still his father, and that had never been about DNA at all. Lake Michigan stretched before us like a gray mirror, reflecting the October clouds that promised rain but hadn't delivered. Derek sat beside me on our bench, the same bench where I'd taught him to skip stones when he was 7, where we'd talked about girls when he was 15, where I'd told him his grandmother had passed when he was 18. Our bench. Our place. The geography of fatherhood. You're scaring me, Dad. Derek's voice was steady, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. Mom won't return my calls. You look like you haven't slept in a week. What's going on? I'd rehearsed this conversation a dozen times. In the shower. In the car. Lying awake at 3 a.m. Staring at the ceiling. None of my rehearsals had prepared me for the reality of sitting here, looking at my son, biology be damned, and preparing to shatter his world. What do you know about what happened at the gala? Just what's in the news. Some doctor got arrested for fraud. Mom was mentioned as a witness. Derek's eyes searched my face. Is she in trouble? Your mother made some mistakes. Serious ones. She got involved with a man who manipulated her into transferring money to a fake investment company. I kept my voice level. The FBI is involved. She's cooperating. She'll probably avoid criminal charges, but her career at Northwestern is over. Derek absorbed this slowly. I watched him process the same careful, methodical analysis I'd taught him to apply to architectural problems. Break it down. Examine each component. Understand the structure before attempting repairs. The man who was arrested, Dr. Mercer. Derek's jaw tightened. He and Mom were, for how long? 6 months. Maybe longer. Derek was quiet. A jogger passed behind us, footsteps crunching on gravel, oblivious to the earthquake happening on our bench. I'm sorry, Dad. His voice cracked slightly. I'm so sorry. That's not why I asked you here. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the folded DNA report. There's something else. Something your mother kept secret for a very long time. Something I only learned 2 days ago. Derek looked at the paper in my hand. What is that? A DNA test. I unfolded it, smoothing the creases. I took it because of something that came up during the FBI investigation. Something your mother disclosed. Dad, you're freaking me out. Just tell me. I handed him the report. Watched his eyes scan the header, the methodology section, the results. Watched them stop on the number that had stopped my own heart 48 hours earlier. Asterisk. Probability of paternity. 0%. Asterisk. I don't understand. Derek's voice was barely a whisper. This says, I'm not your biological father. The words hung between us. The lake lapped against the shore. Somewhere, far away, a dog barked. That's not possible. Derek shook his head, still staring at the paper. You're my dad. You've always been my dad. This is some kind of mistake. It's not a mistake. Your mother had a relationship with someone else about 22 years ago, before you were born. She never told me. She never told anyone. I paused. She let me believe you were mine. Let both of us believe it. Derek stood abruptly, the report crumpling in his fist. He walked to the water's edge, shoulders rigid, staring at the horizon. I gave him space. Some pain needs room to breathe. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick. Do you know who he is? The biological. No. I don't want to know. Unless you do. Derek turned to face me. His eyes were red, but he wasn't crying. Not yet. He looked lost. A boy who had suddenly discovered that the map he'd been following his entire life had been drawn wrong. You raised me, he said. You taught me to ride a bike. You helped me with homework. You drove me to soccer practice and sat through every terrible school play and held me when I cried about stupid things that don't matter anymore. I did. Was any of that real? Or were you just pretending? The question broke something in my chest. Derek. I stood and walked to him, stopping an arm's length away. I didn't know. Not until 2 days ago. Every moment we've shared, every memory we've built, I was there because I wanted to be. Because loving you was the easiest, most natural thing I've ever done. But I'm not your son. Not really. You're my son in every way that matters. I reached out and gripped his shoulder. DNA is just chemistry. It tells you about chromosomes. It doesn't tell you about the nights I stayed up worrying about your future. It doesn't tell you about the pride I felt watching you give that valedictorian speech. It doesn't tell you about the way my heart feels right now, looking at you, terrified that I'm losing you. Derek's composure finally cracked. The tears came silent at first, then shaking his whole body. I pulled him into a hug, the way I had when he was small, when the monsters were under the bed and Dad's arms could make everything safe. I don't care about the DNA, I said into his hair. I care about you. I chose to be your father every single day for 21 years, and I'm choosing it again, right now. The only question is whether you still want me. Derek pulled back, wiping his eyes with his sleeve. You're my dad, he said. You've always been my dad. Some piece of paper doesn't change that. No, I agreed. It doesn't. We stood there for a long moment, father and son, looking out at the water. The clouds had begun to break. Thin streams of sunlight pierced through, turning patches of the lake to silver. What happens now? Derek asked. I don't know. Your mother and I. That's over. But you're not over. You'll never be over. I put my arm around his shoulder. We figure it out. Together. The way we always have. Derek leaned into me. The way he used to when he was small. I love you, Dad. 3 words. The same 3 words he'd said 1,000 times before. But today, they carried the weight of choice, of acceptance, of a bond that had nothing to do with biology and everything to do with truth. I love you too, son. The Dirksen Federal Building rose like a monument to consequence. 30 stories of glass and limestone, housing the Northern District of Illinois, where Julian Mercer would finally answer for 15 years of predation. I arrived at 8:47 a.m., 13 minutes before the trial was scheduled to begin. The hallway outside courtroom 1704 was already crowded journalists with press badges, curious spectators, and a cluster of women I recognized from Ray's files. The victims: Meredith Sinclair from Boston, Patricia Vance from Miami, Elena Rodriguez from Dallas, Sarah Chen from Phoenix, Amanda Hayes from Atlanta. They had all come. All 5 of them, plus Vicky, who would testify later in the proceedings. 6 women whose lives Julian had dismantled. 6 women who had found the courage to face him in open court. Meredith saw me first. She crossed the hallway, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "Mr. Whitfield." "Marcus." Her grip was firm. "Thank you for what you did. Without your cooperation, we wouldn't be here." "You're the brave ones," I said, coming forward, testifying, "after everything he put you through. Brave or desperate?" Meredith's smile was thin. "I've spent 6 years watching him destroy other women while I stayed silent. That silence ends today." The courtroom doors opened at 9 a.m. sharp. We filed in victims to the left, defense team to the right, press in the gallery, public in the remaining seats. I found a spot in the third row, close enough to see Julian's face when he entered. He looked diminished. The charcoal Armani had been replaced by a standard-issue suit, probably purchased by his defense team to make him appear relatable. The silver hair was less carefully styled. The practiced smile was absent entirely. Julian Mercer, the man who had commanded every room he entered, now shuffled to the defense table with the hunched posture of the defeated, almost defeated. His eyes still scanned the courtroom with calculation, searching for angles, advantages, escape routes, old habits. "All rise," the bailiff announced. "The United States District Court for the Northern District of Illinois is now in session. The Honorable Judge Patricia Morrison presiding." Judge Morrison was 62, silver-haired, with a reputation for zero tolerance toward white-collar criminals. Diana had called it a favorable assignment. Looking at her stern expression as she took the bench, I understood why. "United States versus Julian Marcus Mercer," she read. 37 counts, including wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. "Is the government ready to proceed?" "Ready, Your Honor." Assistant U.S. Attorney Catherine Webb stood at the prosecution table, flanked by Diana Reyes and 2 other FBI agents. "Is the defense ready?" Julian's lead attorney, a silver-tongued veteran named Harrison Burke, rose with practiced confidence. "Then let's begin. Miss Webb, your opening statement." Catherine Webb approached the jury, 12 ordinary citizens who would decide Julian's fate. She was 45, sharp-featured, with the measured cadence of someone who had spent 20 years turning complex financial crimes into stories juries could understand. "Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about a predator. Not the kind you see in movies. No weapons, no violence, no dark alleys. Dr. Julian Mercer is a different kind of predator. He hunts with charm. He kills with trust. And over the past 15 years, he has destroyed the lives of at least 6 women, stealing over $3.4 million while leaving behind shattered marriages, ruined careers, and broken families." She walked slowly past the jury box, making eye contact with each member. "You will hear from his victims, women like Dr. Meredith Sinclair, former CFO of Boston Medical Center, who lost $520,000 in her marriage. Women like Victoria Whitfield, CFO of Northwestern Memorial Hospital, who was manipulated into transferring $240,000 of her family's savings to a shell company in the Cayman Islands." Webb paused, letting the numbers sink in. "The defense will tell you these were consensual relationships, willing investors making informed decisions, but the evidence will show a calculated pattern of exploitation. Dr. Mercer identified vulnerable women, successful, wealthy, often in struggling marriages. He seduced them, isolated them, and then convinced them to invest in companies that existed only on paper. When they ran out of money, he moved on. New city, new name, new victims." She returned to the prosecution table and picked up a photograph Julian at a charity gala, surrounded by admirers. "This is the face Dr. Mercer showed the world. Brilliant neurosurgeon, best-selling author, philanthropist. But behind that facade was a con artist who viewed women as nothing more than bank accounts to be emptied." Webb set down the photo. "Over the next 3 weeks, we will prove every element of every charge. We will show you the money trails, the fake companies, the victims who trusted Dr. Mercer with their hearts and their savings. And when we're done, we will ask you to hold him accountable." to send a message that predators like Julian Mercer cannot hide behind charm and credentials. That justice applies to everyone, regardless of how expensive their suit or how impressive their resume. She sat down. The courtroom was silent. Harrison Burke rose for the defense, buttoning his jacket with deliberate calm. Ladies and gentlemen, the prosecution wants you to see a monster. But what you're actually looking at is a successful physician who had consensual relationships with consenting adults. Every investment these women made was their own choice. Every dollar they transferred willingly. He spread his hands. The picture of reasonableness. Were there affairs? Yes. Were there poor decisions? Absolutely. But poor decisions are not crimes. Regret is not evidence of fraud. And a man should not lose his freedom simply because his romantic partners later wished they had chosen differently. I watched Julian nod along, the faintest trace of his old confidence returning. But across the aisle, I saw Meredith Sinclair's expression harden. Patricia Vance's hands clenched in her lap. Elena Rodriguez whispered something to Sarah Chen, who nodded grimly. The defense could spin whatever narrative it wanted. The truth was sitting in the courtroom, waiting to testify. The government calls Victoria Whitfield. Day 11 of the trial. I had watched Meredith testify with quiet dignity, describing how Julian had dismantled her marriage and her savings. I had watched Patricia break down on the stand, apologizing to her ex-husband in the gallery. I had watched Elena, Sarah, and Amanda each take their turn. Now it was Vicky's turn. She walked to the witness stand in a navy blue suit I didn't recognize, probably purchased specifically for this moment. Her hair was shorter than I remembered. Her face was thinner. The past 3 weeks had aged her in ways that 23 years of marriage hadn't. She raised her right hand. I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Catherine Webb approached with the measured pace of a surgeon preparing an incision. Mrs. Whitfield, please state your occupation for the record. I was the chief financial officer of Northwestern Memorial Hospital. Vicky's voice was steady, rehearsed. I resigned 2 weeks ago. And how did you come to know the defendant? Dr. Julian Mercer. We met at a hospital fundraiser in April of this year. He was charming, attentive. He asked about my work, my family, my interests. He made me feel. She paused, searching for the word. Seen. And your relationship evolved beyond professional? Yes. Within a few weeks, we began meeting privately. Lunches at first, then dinners, then. Vicky's eyes dropped to her hands. Hotels. Were you aware that Dr. Mercer was married? He told me his marriage was ending, that his wife didn't understand him, that they were staying together only for appearances. A bitter laugh escaped her. The classics. Webb nodded. At some point, Dr. Mercer introduced you to an investment opportunity. Can you describe that? He mentioned a startup he was involved with. Lakeshore Medical Innovations. Surgical AI technology. He said early investors were seeing 40% annual returns. He showed me projections, partnership agreements, testimonials from other investors. Did you invest? Yes. Over 6 months, I transferred $240,000 from my personal savings to an account he provided. Did your husband know about these transfers? Vicky's eyes finally lifted. No. Marcus didn't know. Julian told me to keep the investment confidential. He said it was for tax purposes. But really, her voice cracked. Really, it was so I couldn't back out. Every secret I kept made me more dependent on him, more trapped. Webb allowed the silence to settle. Mrs. Whitfield, during the course of your relationship with Dr. Mercer, did he ever threaten you? Not with violence, but he had leverage. Vicky's hands twisted in her lap. Early on, he discovered something about my past, a secret I had kept for over 20 years. He made it clear that if I tried to end things, if I told anyone about the investment, he would reveal that secret to my husband and my son. What was the secret? Harrison Burke shot to his feet. Objection, Your Honor. Relevance. It goes to the defendant's pattern of coercive control. Webb countered. Judge Morrison considered for a moment. I'll allow it. The witness may answer. Vicky closed her eyes. When she opened them, tears were streaming down her cheeks. 22 years ago, I had an affair with a colleague. I became pregnant. My son, Derek. She took a shuddering breath. My son is not my husband's biological child. I never told anyone. Not Marcus. Not Derek. No one. Until Julian found out. The courtroom stirred. Journalists scribbled furiously. Jury members exchanged glances. I sat perfectly still. How did Dr. Mercer discover this information? Webb asked. I don't know. He had resources. Connections. One day he simply mentioned it. Casually, as if discussing the weather. Interesting that Derek doesn't look much like Marcus, he said. I wonder if your husband has ever noticed. Vicky's voice hardened. From that moment, I was his. He owned me. Every time I thought about leaving, about confessing, he reminded me what I had to lose. And did you ever consider reporting his fraud to authorities? How could I? If I reported him, I'd have to explain how I knew him. The affair would come out. The money would come out. My career, my marriage, my relationship with my son, everything would be destroyed. She wiped her eyes. Julian knew that. He counted on it. He built his entire scheme around women who had too much to lose to fight back. Webb paused, letting the weight of Vicky's words settle over the jury. Mrs. Whitfield, looking at the defendant now, is there anything you would like to say? Harrison Burke objected, but Judge Morrison overruled him. The witness may respond. And the 12, and the 22. Vicky turned to face Julian directly. For the first time since the trial began, she looked at the man who had dismantled her life. I trusted you, she said. I believed every lie you told me. I gave you my savings, my dignity, my integrity. I risked everything I had ever built. My career, my marriage, my son's respect, because you made me believe I was special, that I was different from the others. Her voice strengthened. But I wasn't different. I was just another mark, another bank account to be emptied, another woman to be used and discarded. She straightened in her chair. I can't undo what I did. I can't get back the money or the years or the trust I destroyed. But I can sit here, in this courtroom, and tell the truth. I can make sure you never do this to anyone else. She turned back to the jury. He's a monster. Don't let the charm fool you. Don't let the credentials impress you. Underneath all of it, he's nothing but a parasite who feeds on women's loneliness and fear. Julian's mask finally cracked. For one instant, I saw the real man beneath. Not the charming doctor, not the confident predator, but something small and ugly and afraid. Then the mask returned. But the jury had seen it too. No further questions, Webb said. Day 19. The jury had been deliberating for 6 hours. The jury had been deliberating for 6 hours. I sat in the hallway outside courtroom 1704, watching the minute hand crawl across the clock above the water fountain. Ray was beside me, silent, his presence a comfort I hadn't known I needed. Charlie had stepped outside to take a call from her office. Derek was in class at Northwestern. I'd told him he didn't need to be here, that I would call the moment we knew. Meredith Sinclair paced near the window, her heels marking time against the marble. The other victims had scattered Patricia to the cafeteria, Elena and Sarah to a bench down the hall, Amanda to the restroom for the third time in an hour. Waiting was its own kind of torture. What if they acquit? I asked Ray. The question had been circling my mind for hours. They won't, but what if they do? Burke was good. The reasonable doubt argument. The consensual relationship angle. Marcus. Ray turned to face me. I've watched a lot of trials. I've seen guilty men walk and innocent men go to prison. But I've never seen a jury look at 6 women, 6 credible, accomplished, devastated women, and decide they all made the same mistake by accident. He shook his head. Julian Mercer is going to prison. The only question is for how long. At 4:47 p.m., the bailiff emerged from the courtroom. Jury's back. The words sent electricity through the hallway. We filed in quickly, taking our seats, the air thick with anticipation. Julian sat at the defense table, his posture rigid, his eyes fixed straight ahead. Harrison Burke whispered something to him. But Julian didn't respond. Judge Morrison entered. We rose. We sat. The ritual of justice. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreperson, a middle-aged woman with reading glasses and a calm demeanor, stood. We have, Your Honor. The bailiff carried the verdict form to Judge Morrison, who reviewed it without expression before passing it back. The defendant will rise. Julian stood. For the first time since the trial began, I saw something like fear in his eyes. On count 1. Wire fraud. How does the jury find? Guilty. The word landed like a hammer. Julian flinched, almost imperceptibly. On count 2. Wire fraud. How does the jury find? Guilty. On count 3. Guilty. Count after count. Guilty. Guilty. The foreperson's voice never wavered. A metronome of justice. Each word another brick in the wall rising around Julian Mercer. I lost track of the individual counts. There were 37 of them. 37 opportunities for the jury to see through Julian's charm, to reject his excuses, to believe the women he had destroyed. 37 times, they chose truth. On count 37, conspiracy to commit bank fraud. How does the jury find? Guilty. Judge Morrison nodded. The jury has found the defendant guilty on all counts. Sentencing will be scheduled for January 15th. The defendant is remanded to federal custody, pending sentencing. She turned to Julian. Dr. Mercer, you have been convicted of serious federal crimes. I strongly advise you to use the time before sentencing to reflect on the harm you have caused. The marshals approached. Julian's hands were cuffed behind his back. As they led him toward the side door, he turned just for a moment and looked at the gallery. His eyes found Vicky first, then Meredith, then me. There was no remorse in that gaze, no apology, no recognition of the lives he had shattered. Only the cold, calculated fury of a predator who had finally been caged. Then he was gone. The courtroom erupted. Meredith embraced Patricia, both of them crying. Elena and Sarah clutched each other's hands. Amanda stood alone, tears streaming down her face, whispering something I couldn't hear. Perhaps a prayer, perhaps a promise to herself. Vicky sat motionless in the front row, staring at the door through which Julian had disappeared. I couldn't read her expression. Relief? Grief? Some complicated mixture of both? Ray gripped my shoulder. It's over. No. I watched Vicky slowly rise, gather her purse, and walk toward the exit without looking at anyone. It's not over. It's just different now. Catherine Webb approached, her professional composure softened by a rare smile. Mr. Whitfield, I wanted to thank you personally. Your cooperation was instrumental in this conviction. The wire recording, the financial documentation, your willingness to testify. None of this would have been possible without you. What kind of sentence is he looking at? Minimum 20 years. Given the pattern of behavior and number of victims, Judge Morrison has a reputation for harsh sentencing and fraud cases. I'd expect 22 to 25. 22 years. Julian Mercer would be 65 years old when he emerged from prison, if he emerged at all. His medical license was already revoked. His assets were being seized. His reputation was destroyed beyond repair. It should have felt like victory. Instead, I felt hollow, tired, like I'd been holding my breath for 2 months and had finally exhaled, only to discover that breathing didn't bring relief, just awareness of how exhausted I was. What happens to the money? I asked. The funds he stole? Asset forfeiture proceedings are underway. We've frozen approximately $2.1 million in domestic accounts and are working with international authorities on the offshore holdings. Restitution to victims will be a priority during sentencing. $2.1 million. Not enough to make anyone whole, but something. Ray and I walked out of the Dirksen building into the November dusk. The sky was purple and orange, the sun setting over a city that had no idea what had just happened in courtroom 1704. You okay? Ray asked. I thought about Julian in handcuffs, about Vicky walking away alone, about Derek in class, waiting for a phone call that would tell him justice had been served. I don't know, I admitted. I thought this would feel different, like closure, like the end of something. It is the end of something. Ray lit a cigarette, a habit I hadn't known he had. The question is, what comes next? I pulled out my phone and dialed Derek's number. He answered on the first ring. It's over, I said. Guilty on all counts. Silence. Then a long exhale. Good, Derek said quietly. That's good. I love you, son. I love you too, Dad. I hung up and looked at Ray. What comes next, I said, is figuring out how to live again. The Cook County Courthouse was quieter than the federal building. No press, no spectators, just two people ending what had once been the center of their lives. December 18th, 2 weeks before Christmas. Vicky and I sat at opposite tables in a small courtroom on the 5th floor, our lawyers between us like referees at a boxing match. Charlie had recused herself too personal, she said, and referred me to a colleague named David Park. Vicky had retained Robert Huang, the same criminal defense attorney who had guided her through the FBI interviews. Judge William Chen presided. He was 64, bald, with the weary patience of someone who had witnessed 1,000 marriages dissolve. We are here today to finalize the dissolution of marriage between Marcus Thomas Whitfield and Victoria Chen Whitfield, he read from the file. I have reviewed the settlement agreement submitted by both parties. Before I sign, I want to confirm that both parties have entered into this agreement voluntarily and understand its terms. David Park stood. Your Honor, Mr. Whitfield confirms his voluntary participation and full understanding of the agreement. Robert Huang followed. Mrs. Whitfield confirms the same. Your Honor. Very well. Judge Chen flipped through the pages. The agreement provides for an uncontested dissolution on grounds of irreconcilable differences. Marital assets have been divided as follows. Mr. Whitfield retains the Lincoln Park brownstone, his architecture firm, and his personal retirement accounts. Mrs. Whitfield retains her personal retirement accounts, minus restitution obligations to the federal government, and a cash settlement of $150,000 from joint savings. He looked up. The agreement also addresses the matter of Derek James Whitfield, age 21. Both parties acknowledge that while Mr. Whitfield is not the biological father, he has served as Derek's father for the entirety of Derek's life. The agreement stipulates that no legal action will be taken by either party to alter this relationship and that Derek's inheritance rights through Mr. Whitfield remain intact. I glanced at Vicky. She was staring at her hands, folded neatly on the table in front of her. She looked smaller than I remembered, diminished. The confident CFO who had commanded hospital budgets and negotiated with vendors and managed crises with unflappable competence. That woman was gone. In her place sat someone I barely recognized. Is there anything either party wishes to add before I finalize this dissolution? Silence. Then Vicky raised her hand. Your Honor, may I say something? Judge Chen nodded. You may. Vicky stood slowly. She didn't look at me. Not at first. I know this isn't the place for apologies. The lawyers have done their work. The papers are ready. Everything has been divided and decided and documented. Her voice was quiet but steady. But before this ends, I need Marcus to know something. Now she turned. Her eyes met mine. For the first time since we'd entered the courtroom, I destroyed us. Not Julian. Not circumstances. Not bad luck. I made choices. Terrible. Selfish. Cowardly choices. And I have to live with the consequences. She paused. But the life we built together wasn't a lie. The years we shared, the home we made, the son we raised, those were real. I loved you, Marcus. Imperfectly. Unfaithfully. But I loved you. I didn't respond. I couldn't. The words sat in my chest like stones. I don't expect forgiveness, Vicky continued. I haven't earned it. I may never earn it. But I want you to know that I'm sorry. For everything. For the affair. For the money. For the secrets I kept. For the man I let you believe you were to Derek. Her voice cracked. I'm sorry for all of it. Judge Chen waited a moment, then looked at me. Mr. Whitfield, do you wish to respond? I thought about 23 years of marriage. The wedding in Michigan, where it rained and we danced anyway. The first night in our brownstone, sleeping on a mattress on the floor because the furniture hadn't arrived. The hospital room where Derek was born. Vicky exhausted but radiant, placing our son, her son, in my arms. I thought about the lies. The hundreds of mornings I'd kissed her goodbye, never knowing where she was really going. The thousands of dollars vanishing into Julian's shell companies. The decades of believing I was Derek's father when she knew the truth and said nothing. I thought about forgiveness. What it meant. What it cost. Whether it was even possible. Vicky, I said slowly, I appreciate the apology. I believe you mean it. But I don't know if I can accept it. Not today. Maybe not ever. She nodded, unsurprised. What I can tell you, I continued, is that I don't hate you. I thought I would. After everything I learned, I expected to feel rage, betrayal, the kind of anger that burns for years. But I don't. I just feel tired, sad. Like I'm mourning someone who died a long time ago, and I'm only now allowed to grieve. Vicky's eyes glistened. I hope you find peace, I said. I hope you rebuild something meaningful from what's left. And I hope that someday, not today, not soon, but someday we can be in the same room for Derek's sake without it hurting this much. I hope so too, she whispered. Judge Chen cleared his throat. If there's nothing further, I will sign the final decree. Neither of us spoke. His pen scratched across the paper. A stamp. A signature. 23 years of marriage, dissolved in 30 seconds of bureaucratic ritual. This court declares the marriage between Marcus Thomas Whitfield and Victoria Chen Whitfield officially terminated. Both parties are free to remarry. This proceeding is adjourned. He gathered his files and left. The court reporter followed. The lawyers exchanged professional handshakes and stepped into the hallway, giving us a moment alone. Vicky and I stood on opposite sides of the courtroom, the space between us vast as an ocean. Goodbye, Marcus, she said. Goodbye, Vicky. She walked out without looking back. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the empty judge's bench, the vacant witness stand, the American flag hanging limp in the corner. Then I buttoned my coat and walked out into the December cold. A free man, for the first time in 23 years. She called 3 days after the divorce was final. I was sitting in my study, reviewing blueprints for the Morrison Tower expansion, when her name appeared on my phone screen. Victoria Whitfield. The contact information I hadn't yet deleted. The name that still felt strange attached to the word ex-wife. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Marcus. Her voice was tentative. Careful. Thank you for picking up. What do you need? Vicky. I'm leaving Chicago. Tomorrow morning. I wanted. I thought you should know. I set down my pen. Outside, snow was falling, the first real snow of winter, blanketing the city in white. A fresh start for the new year, people would say. A clean slate. Where are you going? Seattle. My sister offered me a room until I figure things out. There's nothing left for me here. No job, no reputation. No. She trailed off. No home. I thought about the townhouse she'd rented after moving out of our brownstone, a sterile 2-bedroom in River North, furnished by the week, the kind of place where transient people waited for their lives to restart. What about Derek? I talked to him yesterday. He's processing. He said he needs time. Space. Her voice caught. He said he'll call when he's ready. If he's ever ready. Derek had been struggling since the trial. He'd taken a leave of absence from Northwestern, moved into an apartment near campus, and started seeing a therapist twice a week. We talked regularly, dinners on Sundays, phone calls when he needed to vent, but he refused to discuss Vicky, the mother who had lied to him for 21 years. The woman he couldn't forgive. Give him time, I said. He loves you. He just doesn't know how to reconcile that love with what he's learned. Do you think he ever will? I don't know. That's his journey, not ours. Silence stretched between us. The snow continued to fall, covering the garden where we'd once planted tomatoes together, where Derek had learned to catch fireflies, where we'd hosted barbecues for friends who no longer called. Marcus, can I ask you something? Go ahead. Do you ever think about what we could have been? If I hadn't, if I'd been honest from the beginning? The question hung in the air. I'd asked myself the same thing 1,000 times over the past 2 months. What if Vicky had told me about Derek's paternity before he was born? What if she'd confessed to Julian before the fraud began? What if she'd trusted me enough to share her secrets instead of hiding them behind walls of silence? I used to, I admitted. I'd lie awake, imagining alternate versions of us. A Vicky who told the truth. A marriage built on honesty instead of omission. A life without Julian Mercer. And now I think those imaginary versions don't matter. We are who we are because of the choices we made. You chose to keep secrets. I chose not to see what was right in front of me. We built something beautiful on a fractured foundation. And eventually, the cracks caught up with us. That sounds like something an architect would say. I am an architect. A small smile crossed my face. Structures can't survive if the foundation isn't sound. Doesn't matter how beautiful the design is, how much money you invest, how many people admire it from the outside. If the base is compromised, collapse is inevitable. So we were always going to end up here? Maybe. Or maybe not. Maybe with different choices, we'd have built something that could have lasted. I paused. But we didn't make those choices. And I've decided to stop mourning the marriage we could have had and start building the life I still can. Vicky was quiet for a moment. You always were the stronger one, she said finally. I don't feel strong. I feel like I'm holding together with tape and stubbornness. That counts. A soft laugh, almost like the old Vicky. Marcus, I know I don't have the right to ask this, but do you think you could ever forgive me? Not today, not soon, but someday? I considered the question carefully. Forgiveness. Such a simple word for such a complicated process. It wasn't about absolution or forgetting. It wasn't about pretending the harm didn't happen. It was about choosing to set down the weight of resentment so you could move forward without being crushed by it. I'm working on it, I said honestly. Some days are easier than others, but I don't want to carry this anger for the rest of my life. It's too heavy, and it doesn't serve anyone, not me, not Derek, not even you. Thank you. That's more than I deserve, probably. I looked out at the falling snow. But I've decided to stop keeping score. Another silence. Longer this time. The silence of two people who had shared a life and were now learning to be strangers. Goodbye, Marcus, Vicky said. Take care of our son. Thanks for watching. And the next ad visitive. He's my son, I replied. Biology doesn't change that. I know. Her voice broke slightly. That's why I said, our. Because you made him who he is. Not me. Not anyone else. You. The line went dead. I sat in the quiet study, phone still in my hand, watching the snow erase the world outside my window. Tomorrow, Vicky would board a plane to Seattle. Tomorrow, this chapter would truly close. But tonight, I let myself feel the weight of everything we'd lost. The years, the trust, the future we'd imagined together. Then I set down the phone, picked up my pen. Life was waiting to be rebuilt. Ray and I sat on my rooftop deck, watching the Chicago skyline glitter against the January night. Two brothers, one who had grown up in privilege, one who had grown up in shadow, sharing a bottle of whiskey and the silence of men who had been through war together. "Sentencing is next week," Ray said. Diana called. "They're expecting 22 years. Good." She also said, "The restitution fund is approaching 1.8 million. Most of the victims will recover at least 60% of their losses. That's something." Ray swirled his whiskey, watching the amber liquid catch the city lights. "How's Derek?" "Better. He went back to Northwestern last week. Says he's ready to finish his degree." I paused. "He's been asking about you." "About me?" "He wants to know his uncle. The man who helped save his father." Ray was quiet for a moment. In the 3 months since the gala, we had rebuilt our relationship from scratch, two strangers learning to be brothers after 57 years apart. It wasn't easy. We had different histories, different temperaments, different ways of moving through the world. But we had one thing in common. We were both Thomas Whitfield's sons, and we were both determined to be better men than our father had been. "I never expected this," Ray said finally. "Expected what?" "Family. Connection. Whatever this is." He gestured vaguely at the space between us. "I spent my whole life watching from the outside, watching you grow up, graduate, get married, have a son. I told myself I didn't need any of it, that I was better off alone. And now I realize I was just afraid." He met my eyes. Afraid of rejection, afraid of being seen as the mistake, the illegitimate one, the son Thomas Whitfield was ashamed of. He wasn't ashamed of you, Ray. He was ashamed of himself, maybe. But that shame trickled down. It shaped everything I believed about my own worth. Ray took a long drink. "You know what the hardest part was? Watching your wedding. I stood across the street from the church in Michigan, in the rain, watching you and Vicky walk out under that arch of flowers. I wanted so badly to be inside, to be part of something. I tried to imagine it, a 34-year-old Ray, alone in the rain, watching a brother he couldn't acknowledge, marry a woman who would eventually betray him. Why didn't you introduce yourself?" Back then, I almost did. 100 times. But every time I got close, I'd hear Dad's voice in my head. "Stay hidden, Raymond. Protect him from a distance. That's what's best for everyone." Ray shook his head. "I followed that advice for 37 years. And where did it get me? Alone in a storage unit, surrounded by other people's secrets. You're not alone anymore." "No." Ray looked at me. Really looked. The way brothers do when they're finally seeing each other clearly. "I'm not." The wind picked up, carrying the distant sound of traffic and sirens and all the ordinary chaos of a city going about its business. We sat in comfortable silence. Two men who had spent their lives on opposite sides of a wall that no longer existed. "Charlie wants to have a family dinner," I said. "Sunday. Her place. You, me, Derek, her husband and kids, the whole Whitfield clan. Such as it is. A family dinner. She's been planning the menu for a week. Apparently, she's making Dad's pot roast recipe, the one Mom used to make for holidays." Ray laughed, a genuine laugh, surprised out of him. "I never had that pot roast. Dad mentioned it once. Said it was the best thing Margaret ever cooked. Then you should finally taste it." 57 years is long enough to wait. Ray considered for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll be there." "Good." I refilled both our glasses, because I need someone to help me survive Charlie's interrogations. She's already planning to grill you about your years on the force. Apparently, she's fascinated by detective methodology. She sounds terrifying. She's a divorce attorney. Terrifying. is her default setting. We laughed together, the easy laughter of brothers who had finally found each other. Marcus, Ray said after a moment, can I ask you something? Anything. Do you ever regret it? Any of it? The investigation, the wire, the trial, all the ways we tore your life apart to bring Julian down? I thought about the question, about the marriage I'd lost, the secrets I'd uncovered, the comfortable illusions that had been stripped away, one by one, until nothing remained but raw, uncomfortable truth. No, I said finally. I regret what happened. I regret that Vicky made the choices she made, that Julian existed, that Derek had to learn the truth about his paternity in the worst possible way. But I don't regret knowing. I don't regret acting. I'd rather build my life on painful truth than comfortable lies. Even though it cost you everything, it didn't cost me everything. I looked at my brother, this man who had spent decades protecting me from the shadows. It cost me a marriage that was already broken, but it gave me you. It gave me a relationship with Derek that's finally honest. It gave me the chance to start over. This time, with a foundation that can actually hold. Ray raised his glass. To foundations, he said. To brotherhood, I replied. We clinked glasses and drank. Two brothers watching the city lights, building something new from the rubble of everything that had come before. June 14th. The sun blazed over Ryan Field as 2,000 graduates filed across the stage, their purple robes rippling in the summer breeze. Northwestern University's 167th commencement ceremony, the culmination of 4 years of work, ambition, and for one graduate in particular, a journey through fire. I sat in the family section with Ray on my left and Charlie on my right. Her husband, Tom, was wrangling their two kids, 9-year-old Lily and 7-year-old Marcus Jr., my namesake, who was more interested in his iPad than the ceremony. Architecture graduates approaching, Charlie whispered. Consulting the program. He should be up soon. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was ridiculous. I'd watched Derek take his first steps, deliver his valedictorian speech, survive the worst year of his life. A graduation ceremony should have been routine, but nothing about this moment was routine. Derek had almost quit. After the trial, after learning the truth about his paternity, he'd spent 3 months in a fog of depression and anger. He'd stopped attending classes, stopped answering calls, stopped eating regular meals. I'd found him one night in his apartment, surrounded by empty bottles, staring at the DNA report I'd given him. What's the point? He'd asked. Everything I thought I knew was a lie. My whole identity was built on something that wasn't real. I'd sat beside him on that dirty floor and told him about the night I'd received the same report, about the hours I'd spent staring at the number 0%, trying to make it say something different, about the conclusion I'd eventually reached. You're not defined by chromosomes, I'd said. You're defined by choices, by the things you build, the people you love, the man you decide to become. Your mother lied about biology. She didn't lie about who raised you, who taught you, who loves you more than anything in this world. It had taken months. Therapy, long walks along the lakefront, difficult conversations that left us both exhausted. But slowly, Derek had climbed back, returned to classes, finished his thesis project, a community center design inspired by the Morrison Tower, but smaller, more human, focused on connection rather than commerce. And now, here he was, Derek James Whitfield, the announcer called. Bachelor of Architecture, magna cum laude. Derek walked across the stage, taller than I remembered, carrying himself with a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. He shook the dean's hand, accepted his diploma, and paused just for a moment to look out at the crowd. His eyes found mine. He smiled. Not the easy grin of the boy he'd been before. Something deeper. Something earned. I smiled back. Tears streaming down my face without shame. That's my nephew, Charlie said, loud enough for the rows around us to hear. That's my nephew up there. Ray put his hand on my shoulder and squeezed. No. Words. Necessary. After the ceremony, we gathered on the lawn for photographs. Derek in his cap and gown, flanked by me and Ray. Derek with Charlie's family, Lily insisting on holding his diploma. Derek alone, framed against the Gothic spires of University Hall, looking like the architect he was about to become. "I have something for you," I said, pulling an envelope from my jacket. Derek looked at it suspiciously. "If this is money, it's not money." I handed it over. "Open it." He tore the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. A job offer. Whitfield and Associates. Junior architect position. Starting salary. Benefits. And a note at the bottom in my handwriting. "The firm will be yours someday. But first, you have to earn it. Welcome to the family business." "Dad." Derek stared at the paper for a long moment. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. "Dad, I don't know what to say." "Say yes. Then show up Monday morning ready to work harder than you've ever worked in your life." He laughed, that surprised, joyful laugh I'd missed during his darkest months. "Yes," he said. "Absolutely yes." He hugged me then, the way he used to when he was small, when the world was simple and fathers were invincible. I held on tight, memorizing the moment, knowing it would sustain me through whatever came next. "I'm proud of you," I whispered, "not because you graduated, because you fell apart and put yourself back together. That's harder than any degree." "I had help," Derek said. "I had you. You'll always have me." We pulled apart. Ray was pretending to study something on his phone, giving us privacy. Charlie was openly crying while Tom handed her tissues. "One more photo," Charlie demanded, recovering her composure. All the Whitfields. Together, we arranged ourselves, me, Derek, Ray, Charlie, with Tom and the kids joining at the edges. 4 generations of complicated history, condensed into a single frame. A family that had been broken and rebuilt, scattered and reunited, tested by lies and held together by choice. "Okay," Derek said, looking at the group. "With what money?" Charlie laughed. "My signing bonus." Derek grinned at me. "I believe I just got a job." We walked off the field together, laughing, arguing about restaurant choices, looking for all the world like any other family celebrating any other milestone. But we weren't any other family. We were the Whitfields, and we had survived. The Whitfield Foundation for Elder Financial Protection launched on a Tuesday in September, 18 months after Julian Mercer was sentenced to 22 years in federal prison. We held the announcement at the Art Institute of Chicago Neutral Ground, prestigious venue, the kind of place that attracted donors with deep pockets and genuine interest in making a difference. 200 guests filled the Modern Wing's main hall, surrounded by works of art that had survived centuries of human folly. I stood at the podium, note cards in hand, looking out at a crowd that included Ray, Derek, Charlie, Diana Reyes, and in the front row 5 women I had come to think of as sisters in survival. Meredith, Patricia, Elena, Sarah, and Amanda. "Thank you all for being here," I began. "I'm not a public speaker. I'm an architect. I build structures. But over the past 18 months, I've learned that some of the most important structures aren't made of steel and glass. They're made of people, of support systems, of safety nets that catch us when predators try to push us over the edge." I set down the note cards. They suddenly felt inadequate. "I'm here because a man named Julian Mercer targeted my wife. He seduced her, manipulated her, and stole $240,000 from our family. He nearly destroyed my marriage, my relationship with my son, and my faith in the people I loved." The room was silent. 200 people, barely breathing. But I'm not the real victim of Julian Mercer. The real victims are the women he destroyed before he ever met Vicky. Women like Meredith Sinclair, who lost her career and her marriage. Women like Amanda Hayes, who nearly took her own life. Women who trusted the wrong person and paid for that trust with everything they had. I looked at Meredith. She nodded. giving me permission to continue. The Whitfield Foundation exists because no one should face a predator alone. Our mission is threefold. First, education. We're partnering with banks, hospitals, and community organizations to train frontline workers to recognize the signs of elder financial exploitation. Second, support. We're establishing a 24-hour hotline staffed by counselors and legal advocates who can help victims navigate the aftermath of fraud. Third, prosecution. We're funding a fellowship program that places specialized attorneys in district attorneys' offices across the country, ensuring that predators like Julian Mercer face justice instead of quietly moving to their next victim. I paused, letting the words settle. In the past 6 months, we've trained over 400 bank tellers, social workers, and healthcare professionals in 12 states. We've helped 63 victims recover a combined $2.1 million in stolen assets. And we've assisted federal prosecutors in building cases against 14 active fraud schemes targeting elderly Americans. Applause rippled through the room. I held up my hand. But we're just getting started. Elder financial abuse costs Americans over $28 billion annually. That's billion, with a B. It's the fastest growing form of fraud in the country, and it destroys families not just financially, but emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. The victims aren't strangers. They're our parents, our grandparents, our neighbors, our colleagues. I stepped away from the podium and walked to where Meredith sat. Meredith Sinclair was Julian Mercer's first known victim. She lost over $500,000 and her career as a hospital CFO. But she didn't let that define her. Today, she serves as the Foundation's Director of Victim Services, helping other women find the strength she once had to find alone. Meredith stood. The applause was thunderous. Patricia Vance coordinates our Florida operations. Elena Rodriguez leads our Texas outreach. Sarah Chen manages our national hotline. Amanda Hayes, who survived a suicide attempt after Julian destroyed her life, now speaks at conferences across the country, sharing her story so others don't have to suffer in silence. Each woman stood as I named her. 5 survivors, standing together, stronger than the man who had tried to break them. Julian Mercer is in prison, I said, but there are thousands more like him. Predators who see vulnerability as opportunity, who build empires on other people's trust. The Whitfield Foundation won't stop all of them, but we can make their work harder. The Whitfield Foundation, weaned later, the Whitfield Foundation, we can make their work harder. We can shine a light into the shadows where they operate, and we can remind every victim that they are not alone. I returned to the podium for my closing. My father once told me that the measure of a man isn't what he builds for himself, but what he builds for others. I spent 30 years building towers and hospitals and museums, but this foundation, this community of survivors and advocates and ordinary people who refuse to look away, this is the most important thing I've ever built. I looked at Derek, standing beside Ray near the back of the room. Because structures can be rebuilt. Trust can be rebuilt. Even families can be rebuilt. All it takes is a foundation strong enough to hold the weight. The applause carried me off the stage. Donors approached with checkbooks. Journalists requested interviews. Foundation board members discussed next steps and expansion plans. But the moment I would remember, the moment that made all of it worthwhile, came later. When Meredith found me by the coffee station. "Marcus," she said, "I want you to know something. 6 years ago, I thought my life was over. Julian had taken everything. I couldn't see a way forward." She paused. "Today, I help train 50 bank tellers in recognizing grooming behavior. 50 people who will go back to their branches tomorrow and watch for warning signs. 50 potential victims who might be saved because you decided to turn your pain into purpose." "It wasn't just me," I said. "It was all of us. That's exactly my point." She smiled. "That's what makes it a foundation. Not one person holding everything up. A structure that distributes the weight, so no one has to carry it alone. I thought about my father's journal, about Ray watching my wedding from across the street, about Derek learning to trust again, about Vicky, somewhere in Seattle, trying to rebuild her own life from the rubble. The strongest structures, I said, are built on truth. Meredith raised her coffee cup. To truth, she said. To foundations, I replied. 2 years after the valet asked if that was my wife, I stood on Michigan Avenue watching the morning light paint the city gold. It was October again. The trees along the magnificent mile had turned, their leaves blazing red and orange against the steel and glass towers I had spent my life designing. Chicago in autumn, my favorite season, my favorite city. The place where everything had fallen apart and slowly, painfully, come back together. I was 56 now, grayer than I'd been before Julian Mercer entered my life, more lined around the eyes, but also, somehow, more present, more aware of the weight and wonder of ordinary moments. Derek was waiting at the coffee shop on the corner, our new Sunday tradition, replacing the family brunches that had once included Vicky. He'd been at Whitfield and Associates for 16 months now, rising through the ranks with the same quiet determination I'd recognized in myself at his age. Last week, he'd presented his first solo design to a client. They'd approved it without revision. "You're late," he said when I arrived, sliding a cup across the table. Black coffee, no sugar. He knew my order. I was walking, thinking. About what? About how strange it is to be happy again. Derek smiled, that complicated smile he'd developed since learning the truth. The one that held both shadow and light. Is that strange? It feels strange. For a long time, I thought the best I could hope for was functional, productive, moving forward without looking back. I wrapped my hands around the warm cup, but lately, I've realized something. The foundation is thriving. The firm is growing. You're becoming the architect I always hoped you'd be. Ray and I are closer than I ever was with my biological brother. I paused. I have a life I didn't expect, a life built from rubble. Isn't that what architects do? Derek asked. Build something new from what's left? I suppose it is. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the Sunday crowds drift past. Families with strollers, couples holding hands, tourists photographing buildings I had helped design, the ordinary miracle of a city going about its business. Dad, Derek said eventually, can I ask you something? Anything. Do you ever hear from Mom? The question landed gently. We'd developed rules about discussing Vicky, never pushing, never avoiding, just letting the topic arise naturally when it needed to. She sends emails sometimes, updates about her life in Seattle. She's working at a nonprofit now, helping domestic abuse survivors. Seems like she's found some peace. Do you ever write back? Sometimes. Short messages, polite but distant. I looked at my son. Why do you ask? Because I've been thinking about reaching out. Not to reconcile. Exactly. But to, I don't know. Close the loop. Tell her I don't hate her anymore. He stared into his coffee. I'm not sure I'm ready, but I think I might be getting there. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. Take your time. There's no deadline on forgiveness. It happens when it happens, and not a moment before. Is that what you did? Forgave her? I considered the question. Forgiveness. That complicated, misunderstood word that people threw around like it was simple. I let go of the anger, I said finally. I stopped carrying the weight of what she did. Whether that's forgiveness or just exhaustion, I'm not sure anymore. But the result is the same. She doesn't live in my head rent-free, and that's enough. Derek nodded slowly. That sounds like something Uncle Ray would say. He's been a good influence. He's been a good uncle. Derek grinned. Even if he keeps trying to teach me to play poker, I've lost about $300 to him this year. He cheats. I'm convinced of it. Definitely cheats. We laughed together. The easy laughter of two people who had survived the worst and found their way back to joy. After coffee, I walked alone through Millennium Park, past the Bean, past the fountains, past the Pritzker Pavilion, where I had once proposed to Vicky on a summer evening that felt like a lifetime ago. I didn't feel sad anymore, standing in that spot. I didn't feel angry. I felt grateful. Grateful for the years that had been good. Grateful for the lessons hidden inside the years that had been terrible. Grateful for the man I was becoming, not despite the pain, but because of it. My phone buzzed. A text from Ray. Family dinner tonight. Charlie's making pot roast. You in? I smiled and typed back. Always. I pocketed the phone and looked up at the skyline. My skyline. The city I had helped shape. One building at a time. The old Marcus would have seen those towers as monuments to ambition. Proof of success. Validation of worth. The new Marcus saw something different. Structures don't matter because they last. They matter because they shelter. Because they bring people together. Because they stand as proof that human beings can take raw materials, steel, glass, stone, or the broken pieces of their own lives, and turn them into something that serves others. I had spent 2 years learning that lesson, and I would spend whatever years remained trying to live it. I turned toward home, toward family, toward the Sunday dinner, waiting in Charlie's warm kitchen. Behind me, the sun caught the windows of the Morrison Tower, and for just a moment, the building blazed like a lighthouse, a beacon marking safe harbor for anyone lost at sea. I smiled and kept walking. The strongest structures, after all, are built on truth, and mine was finally complete.